Hi, it's Katrina. Think about how easy it is for an entire empire, a bustling city, or a bizarre piece of technology to just get completely swallowed by time. It happens way more than you'd think. In this video, we're going to look at everything from long-lost structures hidden in plain sight to ancient tools that seem way too advanced for their time, and mysterious ruins that raise far more questions than answers. If you love a great detective story from the ancient world, you're going to want to stick around. The Tomb of Gilgamesh. In 2003, archaeologists working in Iraq announced something that's a little hard to believe. They claim to have discovered the lost tomb of Gilgamesh, legendary ruler of ancient Sumer. Gilgamesh is the oldest recorded hero in history. Yet after the discovery was made, all discussion surrounding it disappeared. It's been over 20 years, and to be honest, I'm starting to think maybe they didn't find the forgotten tomb after all. But who was Gilgamesh in the first place? Like I said, he is the oldest recorded hero ever. He predates Homer's legendary stories of the Iliad and the Odyssey by 1,500 years. The Epic of Gilgamesh was written around 2150 BC, over 4,000 years ago. According to his legends, Gilgamesh was the king of Uruk, which is considered the first true city ever built on this planet. He was also a man of deep philosophical wonder. The Epic of Gilgamesh, the world's first great narrative, is all about Gilgamesh trying to find a meaning in his life. It's all about his quest for purpose, in which he meets writers and philosophers, the Sumerian version of Noah, and wrestles with his fear of death. The Epic of Gilgamesh as an academic work is hugely important to human history. It proves that human beings struggled with the same things they struggle with today. But unlike many heroes, Gilgamesh was likely a real man. He's even mentioned in the King's List, a document detailing the reigns of each ancient king of Sumer. The list claims that Gilgamesh ruled for 126 years, and he also possessed superhuman strength. Scholars doubt that he was Herculean when it came to strength, but generally agree that Gilgamesh was a real historical king of Uruk in the 26th century BC. With the history of the world's oldest celebrity out of the way, let's go back to 2003. An expedition led by a team of German scientists excavated the ruins of Uruk in Iraq. They discovered the remains of a building that looked an awful lot like a mausoleum. Jörg Fassbinder from the Bavarian Department of Historical Monuments said the ruined structure looked very similar to Gilgamesh's tomb as described in the epic. Sadly, this was the last anyone ever heard of this discovery. Scientists thought they found the great king's burial plot, but they must have been mistaken. The hunt for Gilgamesh's mythical tomb is still on. Conquistadors in California. Sometimes the darkest pieces of history can be found where you least expect them. Inside a parking deck on the first floor of a campus garage, archaeologists from Santa Clara University in California discovered the ancient foundation of a structure built by the Spanish over 200 years ago. If you live in California, underneath your feet at any given time could be the hidden remnants of when Spain tried to conquer the area. From 1777 until 1833, the city of Santa Clara was a missionary outpost. A few Spanish soldiers were stationed here, and it was the home to some Franciscan friars. There were also hundreds of indigenous Native Americans who had been living in California for thousands of years. The outpost was one of dozens, the small missionary towns extending 2,000 miles north of Mexico City, like the outstretched hand of the Spanish Empire grasping for territory. I actually used to live in a small Spanish mission town called San Juan Bautista. Perhaps you've heard of it? In 2012, construction work at the university motivated a group of archaeology students to start digging. They excavated an area about the size of a city block not far from the campus church, which itself was built in 1926. Why bother excavating a modern university? It's because of what records say about the area. The church built in the 1920s replaced a much older church that had burned down. Records show that in the 18th century, bands of Native Americans lived outside the original church. Students like archaeologist Lee Panich were interested in finding physical evidence of that forgotten time. It was a mysterious research project in their own university's backyard. Pretty convenient. The team uncovered post holes, the remains of plants and artifacts. They also found the remains of Native American homes that were constructed using local materials like tool reed. The evidence shows there was once a bustling town surrounding the church. Tribes from across the San Francisco Bay Area had lived in one huge community here. Historians already knew that the church was the core of a huge Native American neighborhood. What they didn't have was the physical evidence to prove it. Lee Panish said it was only possible thanks to the project that allowed the students to do their digging. Even with the ruins and artifacts found, scientists have a lot of work ahead of them as they put together the lost history of the indigenous communities who lived here. This is a little piece of history that not even some Californians know about. Santa Clara was established during what's known as the Spanish Mission period. In the late 1700s, Spanish colonists streamed into California like a plague of locusts. They founded 21 missions from San Diego to Sonoma. Even after these missions were extinguished, they left their mark. The Camino Real still follows the path of the Spanish outposts along the ruins of what was once a colonial highway. Some of the most popular towns in California today began as a Spanish mission church. Places like San Diego and Santa Barbara, for example. The missionary work resulted in the near-total destruction of the Native American people in California. Prior to the arrival of the Spanish, there were about 300,000 people living in the state. By 1834, there were only 20,000 left. The missions only came to an end after Mexico, which controlled California at the time, gained its independence from Spain in 1821 and shut them all down. Over the next 100 years, the few indigenous people who survived gathered in rancherias, Californian versions of reservations. The amazing lost city in the jungle. In the hot, humid, and bug-infested jungles of Cambodia, researchers identified a lost city. It's a place so amazing that you're going to feel as if you've been transported into the heart of the Khmer Empire. The discovery was part of a project that went on for years, with scientists from around the world trying to lay eyes on a city that nobody had seen for 5 long centuries. After countless hours of research, the project reached its peak. Scientists used aerial laser scans to identify the lost city of Mahendraparvata. Kind of a mouthful, but this city is also known as the Mountain of Indra, king of the gods. That's pretty epic, right? I'm sure you've heard of Angkor, the shining capital of the Khmer Empire in the Middle Ages, but the Khmer had a lot of other cities as well. Their empire lasted 600 years, from the 9th until the 15th century. Mahendraparvata was one of their original cities, built roughly 30 miles north of Angkor. The Khmer often get overlooked, but they shouldn't, and I'm going to tell you why. The Khmer Empire flourished at the same time as the Byzantine Empire, only the Khmer controlled more territory and were arguably more powerful. Many historians compare the Khmer to the Romans in terms of engineering, architectural achievements, politics, and even things like mass production. They ruled over practically everyone. From the Khmer's capital at Angkor, they governed Thailand, Laos, China, Myanmar, and Vietnam. Angkor was also one of the biggest cities in the world at the time. Do you remember Uruk, the city that Gilgamesh ruled 4,000 years ago? Scientists think it had about 40,000 people in it. London in the Middle Ages likely had about 250,000 people, though that number spiked to 600,000 by the 17th century. Angkor, at its pinnacle of power in the 13th century, had about 900,000 people living in it. Scientists think it was one of the biggest, if not the absolute biggest, city on the planet. Yet the empire is largely unknown outside of Asia. The discovery of this new lost city goes to show how incredibly huge and mighty their kingdom was. The research team identified reservoirs, dams, temples, and the ruins of a palace. But there's still a lot that they don't know. The Khmer didn't leave behind the sort of documentation that the Egyptians and the Romans did. Even with all these ruins scattered throughout the jungles of Cambodia, experts struggle to understand what life was like for everyday Khmer people. It's also still unknown how precisely their huge cities were suddenly abandoned. The Khmer went the way of the Maya 500 years earlier. And now for a quick break because it's shout-out time! I want to give a big thank you to Deeg on the Hill and Some Old Bald Guy for supporting this channel. I honestly think that sounding like a cup of tea on a porch in the rain is the best comment I've ever gotten, so thank you so much! If you are new here, be sure to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already for more videos like this. The Vikings and their horses. Vikings loved horses. That seems like a no-brainer, right? I mean, who doesn't love horses other than total maniacs? But when it came to the Vikings, they took their love of horses to the next level. New archaeological evidence has shown that Vikings held their horses in especially high regard. They took them on trips and even laid next to them in death. Scientists found the first evidence that in the 9th century, Vikings brought their horses with them across the North Sea on perilous expeditions to England. They also brought dogs, but that's a story for another day. The evidence comes from bone remains. Horse bones were discovered in cremation mounds in England's Heath Wood. When scientists from Durham University analyzed the bones, they realized the horses had come from Scandinavia to Britain. But they found out a little bit more, too. Prior to this find, researchers had assumed that Viking armies acquired horses when they raided the British Isles. Nobody realized that Vikings were bringing their horses with them to help plunder. As company, the horses weren't spoils of war, they were comrades. And here's another thing. Horse bodies have been found in a lot of Viking burials across the British Isles and Scandinavia. Scientists always interpreted the horses as being symbolic of the journey into the afterlife. However, researchers were thinking maybe a little too much. They were trying to find a complex, symbolic explanation when the truth is that Vikings just wanted to be buried alongside their best horse friends. The evidence shows that Vikings treated their horses more like companion animals than tools. The bone remains discovered in Heath Wood came from horses that were cremated with humans. They were burned on the same funeral pyre together, meaning they clearly shared a special bond. Do you still think that Vikings were savage warriors now that you know how much they loved their horses? Well, I guess you could be both. Desert towers in Uzbekistan. The impressive desert towers of Uzbekistan are all that remain of the Khwarezm, an ancient civilization that flourished for even longer than the mighty Khmer Empire, and I already told you how powerful they were. These incredible fortresses are unlike anything that can be found in any other part of the world. They are officially known as the Desert Castles of Ancient Khwarezm, currently on the UNESCO's tentative list for World Heritage Site status. Not quite, but close. The large majority of the old and crumbling structures can be found in the Khwarezm Oasis, bordered by the Aral Sea and several deserts. If you haven't heard of any of these specific places, you shouldn't feel bad. The Khwarezm civilization thrived in one of the most remote parts of the planet. Even today, you'd have a hard time finding one person out of 100 who could point to Uzbekistan on a map. Never mind identifying the deserts, plateaus, and oases. Even before the Khwarezm, this region was occupied by humans, Stone Age people at first. Then the Khwarezm started building fortifications in the 7th century BC. Production ramped up, with more and more fortresses rising above the sun-scorched desert for the next 300 years. Khwarezm became an official independent state at some point between the 4th century BC and the 1st century AD. They lived so far away from other ancient empires that the truth of their history is unclear. Scientists don't even know how they crumbled and went extinct. Starting in the 4th century, the culture declined. They were likely attacked by the Huns, the Turks, and the Arabs, but then they were just sort of gone. Nothing left of them except these unbelievably megalithic fortresses made of stone in the middle of nowhere. Ayaz Kala is a great example of a Khwarezm castle. Take a look at these pictures. The earliest tower at Ayaz Kala was built in the 4th century BC. Sadly, everything has sort of melted since then. You can tell just from the photographs that anything of worth here has been obliterated. It doesn't even really look like a fortress, but more like a geological formation you can find anywhere in the American Southwest. Ayaz Kala is such a mystery that scientists don't know what it was used for, other than that it must have been some sort of castle. Some experts think it was used to keep cattle inside high walls during winter. Some experts have tried to identify palaces, but everything is so melted that it all just looks like mud. The best colonial site in the Americas. It might surprise you to learn that the best preserved English colonial site in all of the Americas is not in the United States of America. It's on a peninsula on the Canadian island of Newfoundland. The ancient site still goes by its original name, Fairyland. Long before Europeans arrived, Fairyland was visited by the now extinct Beothuk Native Americans. Then, in the 16th century, European fishermen showed up and took over. In the 1620s, the first big groups of English settlers moved in. George Calvert named the first major colony Avalon. George got his inspiration from the legendary island from the myth of King Arthur. Avalon was where Arthur's sword Excalibur was made, and where Arthur went to heal his wounds and much later be buried. Wait a minute, you don't think King Arthur's grave is somewhere in Newfoundland, do you? The best comparison I can make for Fairyland is the Plymouth Colony. Fairyland was also one of the earliest bastions of religious tolerance in North America. People sailed across the sea so that they wouldn't be persecuted for being Puritans. French soldiers weren't particularly fond of English Puritans. In 1696, the French showed up and burned Fairyland to the ground. The site was abandoned for the next 3 centuries, left mostly undisturbed until archaeologists showed up in 1992. Since then, roughly 35% of this settlement has been unearthed. According to archaeologists at the Memorial University of Newfoundland, the beauty of the site is its preservation. Because the Puritan settlers built the village of stone, it's all still there. The only issue is that it's been buried under 300 years of shifting dirt and natural growth. It still needs to be excavated. The Dance of the Thunder God. Something really weird has been found at an ancient site in Peru. It's weird but really cool, and I'm excited about it. You should be too. Archaeologists are calling it a thunder floor, a bizarre piece of advanced ingenuity designed to imitate the sound of the thunder god. It's an ancient dance floor, but far from ordinary. Archaeologists investigating the Peruvian site of Viejo Sangayaico identified the dance floor as being built around 1000 AD, so about 1000 years ago. It was open to the elements and used continuously until around 1532. This dance floor was part of important ritual ceremonies for 500 years, only becoming lost with the Spanish conquest. But just what was so important about it? Kevin Lane from the University of Buenos Aires said it's already known that Andean ritual dance was a big part of ceremonies. Kevin said that this special platform was built to enhance the sounds made by the dancers. Think about dancing on a thin sheet of plywood held up by blocks. Your footfalls are going to make a lot of noise as you thump around on the piece of wood. This was sort of the same thing. The dance floor was built above a hollow space so that the dancers' feet made booming noises like thunderclaps as they danced. Funnily enough, archaeologists found the dance floor by accident when they walked on it and heard a hollow noise, like they just walked on a secret trapdoor. Now that you know how, you need to know why. The dance floor was likely built outside a temple dedicated to a lightning deity, most likely Catequil. In many cultures across Peru, Catequil was worshipped as a weather god. The dancers would have done their thing during special rituals, though scientists don't know how the rituals worked. That part of history is long gone. The platform could have held up to 26 dancers all thumping around at once. The dancers were likely joined by a whole orchestra of musicians. There would have been drums banging, maybe some flutes or trumpets blowing, and the dancers' footfalls like great booms of thunder. This would have been truly spectacular to see. The unstoppable Lord Baal. Let's go across the world to Syria, where one of the largest and most mysterious ancient stones tells a very old story. Believe me when I say it's awesome. If you watch the channel a lot, you'll probably hear the word stele fairly often. A stele is a slab of stone or wood from the ancient world erected as a monument, usually commemorating something. When someone, typically a king, won a great victory, he would commission a stele to be placed in the capital with the details of his victory etched onto it. The stele I want to show you today was discovered in 1932 within the Acropolis of Ugarit. Ugarit was a mighty port city that dominated a large stretch of Syrian coastline, founded in 6000 BC and abandoned 5,000 years later. It lasted for a long time. It was destroyed during the Bronze Age collapse, likely at the hands of the Sea Peoples. With 5,000 years of history, you bet I could talk about Ugarit until the cows come home, leave again, and come home a second time. But I want to focus on the Baal stele, also sometimes called Baal with thunderbolt. The limestone monument depicts the god Baal, lord of thunder, storms, and rain, looming over a very small man, like a giant standing over a toddler. The smaller figure's identity is unknown. Researchers think he was a king of Ugarit, but they don't know which one. It's Baal who is the exciting one. The monument was made in the 15th century BC. Baal has his right hand raised, and in his hand is a battle mace. He looks sort of like an angry chef waving around a spatula. In his left hand is a thunderbolt in the shape of a spearhead, very much reminiscent of Zeus in Greek mythology. Only Baal is much older. What does it all mean? The limestone monument was excavated in 1932 by French archaeologist Claude Schaeffer about 66 feet from the ruins of the Temple of Baal. It was most likely originally in the temple, meant to be a depiction of Baal offering his divine protection to the new king. But Baal wasn't the only great god of this ancient city. 8 other stelae were recovered in the general area, and then 14 more at the Temple of Dagon. Dagon was a bizarre fish deity that also appears in the Bible alongside Baal. Secrets of the Lost Haida Treasure, Part 1. The people of Haida were at the forefront of the Canadian fur trade in the late 18th century, trading sea otter pelts with a handful of Europeans. But it wasn't until the 1850s that the outside world learned of these mysterious people living in the northern reaches of British Columbia. Ships could easily sail from Vancouver up the coast to Haida, where they encountered the Native Americans. In most cases, foreign traders sailed into the waters in search of peaceful negotiations, but sometimes foreigners were there to steal treasure that belonged to the indigenous people. One of these stolen treasures came with a curse. How much of what I'm about to say is true is up to you. The San Francisco Call newspaper released an article on April 7, 1897, detailing the history of a very strange artifact. The article claimed that where the artifact went, disaster and desolation followed. It was very similar to what would happen 25 years later with the relics from Tutankhamun's tomb and the alleged curse of the mummy. It began 30 years earlier with Hans Andersen, an unscrupulous sailor who took his vessel up the Pacific coast to trade with small communities of Native Americans. But Hans was more of a pirate than a merchant. On a dark night, he raided a series of native religious structures and carried away everything that looked valuable. Among these relics was an idol, something Hans' crew saw as a hideously ugly carving, but to the Haida people, it was a sacred object. When they realized they had been robbed, the clan shamans performed incantations directed at Hans' fleeing ship. The incantations were to curse the thieves and bring misfortune upon any who touched the stolen idol. It sounds sort of like the beginning of a horror movie, doesn't it? In a way, it was. Hans Andersen sailed south to Vancouver Island, where he died due to a mysterious ailment. He suddenly started convulsing, and then that was it. He was dead. Maybe it was the curse, or maybe it was a coincidence. Either way, the misfortune had only just begun. There's more to the story, so keep watching. The strange rock faces of Brazil. In the Amazon jungle, a sudden plunge in water levels led to a remarkable discovery. Human faces have appeared on rocks that have been mostly submerged for more than 1,000 years. The drought is so severe that the human faces appeared on the rocky shore like the blank visages of ancient ghosts. This strange yet mystifying discovery was made in northern Brazil in the city of Manaus. The carved faces were spotted on a long stretch of river shore near where the Rio Negro flows into the Amazon. According to archaeologist Jaime Oliveira, the faces were carved by an indigenous group who lived in this part of the jungle long before Europeans arrived. Human occupation here dates back roughly 2,000 years. But just whose faces are they, and what does their reappearance after so many years mean? This wasn't the first time the faces were seen. They appeared in 2010 when the water level dropped to an alarming 44.7 feet. In 2023, the water dropped even lower. The Brazilian government blamed the lack of water on El Niño, but things aren't looking much better in 2024. As for the original purpose of the strangely haunting faces, I don't know, and neither do the experts. Jaime said they appeared to be anthropomorphic figures, perhaps of gods or monsters from local folklore. Then again, maybe these are the haunted faces of tribespeople who suffered the effects of a similar drought a millennia ago. Maybe the faces were carved into the stones as a warning that if they should be seen again, hard times are imminent. What do you think? Searching for the Great Sultan's tomb. There is one sultan whose tomb has been eluding researchers for decades. Recently, the quest to discover Suleiman I's long-lost burial revealed the remains of a lost outpost from the Ottoman Empire. The search for the tomb brought archaeologists to a pair of vineyards outside the tiny Hungarian village of Szigetvar. 2 decades ago, one of the proprietors of a vineyard in the town went to work expanding his cellar. During the project, he came across a mysterious red sandstone block. He used that block to prop open the door of his wine cellar. What this man didn't realize is that the block may have once been part of the mausoleum complex of Suleiman the Magnificent. With a name like that, you know he must have been a big deal. And he was. Suleiman I was the most prolific builder and most celebrated military leader in the history of the Ottoman Empire. The Ottomans got their start in the Anatolia region of Turkey in 1299. They muscled their way into becoming a superpower of the world, remaining at the top until they were beaten back into oblivion during World War I. The empire reached its height long before that brutal war. The golden age of the Ottoman Empire was in the 16th century under the rule of Sultan Suleiman I, aka Suleiman the Magnificent. He earned his name for being such a magnificent monarch. He extended the territory of the Ottomans so that they soon lorded over almost every piece of the Middle East, North Africa, and huge sections of Eastern Europe. At the same time, the Habsburg dynasty of Europe was busy conquering as much as they could. Suleiman wanted all of Europe to himself, and this put him on a direct crash course with the Habsburg forces in Hungary. The 16th century was awash with the blood of battles. Bit by bit, town by town, the Ottomans conquered parts of Hungary, turning churches into mosques everywhere they went. They would ultimately rule the nation for 150 years. Now let's get back to that red brick propping open the cellar door for 20 years. Other red bricks have been found by other farmers and winemakers in the rural Hungarian countryside, but until very recently, they hadn't realized the significance of the bricks. The farmers thought that the red bricks were part of old Turkish ruins. That all changed when archaeologists brought remote sensing technology to the area. Underneath the house, the scientific instruments identified buried ruins. The excavations that followed confirmed that yes, they were ruins. The whole city of Turbek is buried beneath vineyards and farms. Turbek was a popular pilgrimage destination for Muslims during the Ottoman occupation of Europe. It flourished under the rule of Suleiman, who happened to die within its walls in 1566 of natural causes. Norbert Papp from the University of Pécs called the discovery of Turbek the most exciting find from the Ottoman period in Hungary. But what about Suleiman? Are the red bricks really part of his tomb? And where is his body? Turbek's discovery was announced in 2016. Suleiman's mausoleum still hasn't been found underneath the vineyards. However, he does have another mausoleum that you can see through yourself in Istanbul. It is an enormous structure that was built a year after his death and contains his body. But not all of it. This is about to get gross. His heart and his organs were buried in Turbek, where he died 450 years ago. Legend has it that his heart was placed in a special golden box deep in his mausoleum. It's this mausoleum that scientists are hoping to find in Hungary, the one containing the Sultan's shriveled heart. Secrets of the Lost Haida Treasure Part 2. Hans Andersen, the thief of the Haida treasure, owed a lot of money to the captain of a schooner named the O.F. Fowler. In the wake of his death, Hans had his assets liquidated. All of his stuff, including the cursed artifact he had stolen, was given over to the captain. The next time the schooner set sail, she crashed into some rocks. The captain and a handful of crew members were killed. It's at this point that things start to get seriously paranormal. The artifact somehow floated away from the wreckage to the shore, where it was discovered by a fisherman. A week later, that fisherman dropped dead from brain fever. The object was picked up by some whalers who sold it to a prosperous man from San Francisco named Robert Llewellyn. He didn't die a mysterious death, at least not right away. First, he suffered years of hardship, his wealth gradually slipping away until he was left with nothing but a small saloon and no cash. Then, just when things couldn't get worse, Robert fell down a flight of stairs and died. The next few owners of the artifact are unknown. There were apparently 4 more deaths before the artifact landed in the possession of John Coyne, a plumber who also collected curious objects. Then, after a bit of bad luck, it was purchased by a more sophisticated collector named John Bardwell. The idol was gifted with several other objects to the Golden Gate Park Museum in 1897. The same year, the San Francisco Call published its story in their paper. Once the museum acquired the object, the deaths stopped. But it wasn't the end of the weirdness. Curators at the museum were disturbed because it seemed like every day something was falling off its shelf and breaking. It started with an oriental vase and was followed by an Egyptian statue that smashed to pieces. Unfortunately, there is no information about what happened afterward. The newspaper article was published while the objects at the museum were being smashed, placing the blame directly on the Haida idol. Thanks to a bit of sleuthing, I have something to show you. This is the likely culprit for the string of tragic deaths in the 19th century. It does look a little bit evil with its huge black eyes and spiky horns. The image is from the Golden Gate Park Museum, with the acquisition date marked 1897. The dating matches perfectly with the story, but there are a few discrepancies. The museum claims the relic is a feast bowl from the Kwaikutl, an indigenous nation to the south of Haida. It's possible the museum made a mistake. These things do happen. It's also possible that the article from 1897 made a mistake. But regardless of who made the mistake, this horned feast bowl is indeed the cursed artifact. Some believe the newspaper embellished the story to promote the Golden Gate Park Museum, tricking people into going to see the cursed relic. What are your thoughts? Do you think artifacts can be cursed? Let me know in the comments below. The Dashka Stone. I've covered a lot of stone tablets on this channel, but none of them have been quite as controversial as the Dashka Stone, also known as the Map of the Creator. Some believe this tablet to be the guideline used by whoever created the planet. As impossible as that may seem, this could be a map up to 120 million years old. The Dashka Stone was discovered in July of 1999 by archaeologists from Bashkir State University in the Ural Mountains of Russia. All these years later, after countless attempts to decipher it, nobody has been successful. But there are many theories, of course. The tablet not only depicts the landscape of the Ural Mountains, it shows 12,000 kilometers of civil engineering projects, including dams, canals, and what looks like some mysterious writing. To some, this thing is scary accurate, as if whoever created it had an aerial view. But how would that even be possible? And that's not even the craziest part. The Dashka Stone is surprisingly large. I mean, I guess it has to be to fit all that information. It's almost 5 feet tall, 3.5 feet wide, and 6 inches thick. It's also surprisingly heavy, weighing about 1 ton. Alexander Chuvirov, a professor of archaeology from Bashkir State, led a team of Russian and Chinese scientists to investigate the tablet. They were shocked to find that the stone seems to show a precise topographical map of Bashkiria, a specific place in the Ural Mountains, complete with details like mountains and rivers that are still there. Dr. Chuvirov decided to name the stone Dashka after his granddaughter, who just happened to be born on the same day of the discovery. Quite the honor, right? Wouldn't you like a tablet named after you? This enormous tablet seems like it was made to last, on purpose. It has 3 layers to it, which indicates it was definitely made by human hands, or at least artificially made. So what is it made of? The first and thickest layer is like a sturdy cement or ceramic mix made from dolomite. Then there's the second layer, just 1 inch thick, made of diopside glass mixed with some silicon. The last layer is the thinnest, made from a mix of calcium and porcelain. According to ancient origins, this helped protect the stone and also created a diffused light effect to help illuminate the stone. This adds to the theory that it was made by some very advanced civilization. Why does the tablet have layers at all? Well, some think it's to protect it from damage. And hey, it did the trick, didn't it? I mean, it's ancient and it's in pretty good condition. Chuvirov explained how they were able to identify what the map was showing. With a team of experts in various fields, including cartography, physics, math, geology, they decoded the map, identifying rivers and an important canyon like following breadcrumbs to confirm the accuracy of the tablet. Since it is so old, this means that the tectonic plates have shifted over the millions of years. Luckily for them, the landscape of present-day Bashkiria hasn't changed all that much, and they were able to identify the most important feature, which was Ufa Canyon. Okay, but some remain unconvinced, suggesting that these random cracks in the slab are just a coincidence. And what about the extreme date of 120 million years? This date comes from fossils of shells found in the rock. A more realistic date is that the tablet was made 3,000 years ago, which makes more sense and is still very old given all the detail and information in the map. The hieroglyphics have still not been deciphered, but could be ancient Chinese. So not only is there a map, but also a code to crack. So what do you think? Are all these lines just a coincidence? Or is this truly an ancient map? Or even a map of the creator? Let me know your thoughts. And now for number 10. But first, I wanted to give a big shout out to Randy Rosas and Nicholas Steele. What's up, guys? Thanks so much for watching and supporting Origins Explained. If you are new here, you know what to do. Be sure to hit that subscribe button and join the family. Exploding craters. Sinkholes can be absolutely terrifying. Have you seen those videos of sinkholes just randomly opening up and swallowing a car or a whole building? I would hate to be around to witness the ground collapsing in on itself. But in Siberia, they have an even more frightening phenomenon: craters that explode. For over a decade, at least 8 giant holes, each one about 160 feet deep and 65 feet wide, have opened up across Siberia. This occurrence has baffled scientists for years because they didn't know what was going on. But recently, they've developed a theory to explain how these things formed. These craters are only found in Russia's northern Yamal and Gaidan peninsulas, and nowhere else in the Arctic. This suggests that the secret to solving this mystery might be hidden in the landscape itself. All sorts of ideas have been thrown around about what caused those monstrous holes. Some propose that meteor impacts could be to blame, while others suggest the craters could be the result of natural gas explosions. These craters might be appearing where old lakes once existed, with natural gas bubbling up from the permafrost underneath. These lakes could have dried up, which would have exposed the ground underneath to frigid temperatures that sealed off vents, preventing the gas from escaping. As a result, the gas would have been trapped in the permafrost, eventually being released by exploding through the surface, leaving these giant craters behind. But this last theory doesn't account for the variety of geological locations where these holes are found, many of which were never covered by lakes. The idea of natural gas accumulating within the permafrost also doesn't make the most sense. It doesn't explain why these craters are only found in northern Russia. So what's going on here? The icy ground throughout the Yamal and Gaidan peninsulas isn't all the same. It's like a crazy quilt, with some spots barely frozen and others solid as rock. The landscape also ranges in thickness, from just a few hundred feet to 1,600 feet. Now, to solve the mystery of these exploding craters, let's go back in time for a moment. More than 40,000 years ago, the ground in Siberia froze over, trapping ancient marine sediments loaded with methane gas. Over time, that trapped gas turned into huge reserves of natural gas. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. All that gas trapped beneath the surface is like a little furnace, heating things up and melting the ice from below. And this would cause pockets of gas to form at the bottom of these reserves. The icy ground in Russia and other places is also starting to melt, which may be speeding up the rate at which these craters are forming. And in places where the ice is already pretty thin, like on these peninsulas, it's like a double whammy, melting from the top and the bottom. Then add in all that gas pressure and boom! You've got a recipe for a permafrost party where the ground just might explode. The Charioteer. In Siberia, where the frosty winds blow and the ground stays frozen for most of the year, a team of archaeologists set out on a quest that would unearth a fascinating piece of history. While excavating an ancient burial site, they stumbled upon the untouched grave of a person believed to be a charioteer. For over 3,000 years, this man was frozen in time. He was found in Caucasia, hidden beneath layers of earth and ice. But what made the discovery truly extraordinary was the presence of a peculiar artifact. Along with the man, they found a hooked metal attachment for a belt. It was intricately crafted and perfectly preserved. This unique find hinted at a fascinating aspect of ancient Siberian culture: the use of horse-drawn chariots. I can almost picture it now. Brave charioteers racing across the icy tundra, their reins tied to their waists with these metal hooks. These hooks would have allowed them to steer their trusty steeds with precision and speed. Similar artifacts have been found in the distant lands of China and Mongolia, connecting Siberia to a vast network of ancient civilizations. Alexei Timoshenko, the lead archaeologist, marveled at the significance of their discovery. He explained to Live Science how the metal hook was found exactly where it should be, around the waist of the charioteer in the undisturbed grave. But the discovery didn't end there. As the team continued their excavations, they uncovered even more graves dating back thousands of years, each offering a glimpse into the lives of ancient Siberians. From bronze knives to intricate jewelry, the artifacts buried alongside the charioteer spoke of a rich and vibrant culture. Oleg Mitko, another archaeologist involved in the project, revealed that while similar belt hooks had been found before, their true purpose had remained a mystery until now. According to him, the charioteer's grave helped researchers understand why the artifact was important in ancient Siberian society. You know the saying, when one door closes, another opens, right? Well, it's like that with mysteries too. Just when we thought we had one figured out, another one popped up. While we now have evidence suggesting that the ancient Siberians used chariots, no chariots have been found. We have the grave of the charioteer and his metal belt hook, but where's his chariot? Mammoth Tiara. In Siberia's Denisova cave, archaeologists stumbled upon an ancient tiara. You know, the tiara, crafted from tusks of long-extinct woolly mammoths. This unique headpiece, which is estimated to be between 35,000 and 50,000 years old, may be the oldest of its kind ever discovered in North Eurasia. Imagine the surprise uncovering something so rare, an artifact meticulously crafted by Paleolithic dwellers of the region. To make such an adornment, the ancient craftsmen would have followed a complex process, involving cutting, shaping, and polishing mammoth ivory into thin strips before making them into a headband. But what was the purpose of this tiara? Was it a symbol of royalty or simply a practical accessory for keeping hair in place? Similar headpieces found in other regions were adorned with intricate engravings, suggesting that whoever wore it had a special significance in ancient cultures. Archaeologists also uncovered other artifacts, like an ivory ring, a bone needle, and beads. The inhabitants of this cave likely had their own unique customs and traditions, but the details of their society are a bit fuzzy. The Denisova cave is famous because it was where archaeologists first found the remains of an extinct human lineage called the Denisovans. They were like the cousins of Neanderthals. The ivory tiara was discovered in the same chamber where a 40,000-year-old adult tooth was found. The tooth belonged to one of these Denisovans, so it's likely that the tiara belonged to one of them as well. Giant wolf's head. In the summer of 2018, a Russian man named Pavel Efimov made a horrifying discovery. While taking a stroll along the shores of a river in Siberia, he noticed something sticking out of the permafrost. When he got closer, he saw that it was the severed head of a wolf. And it wasn't just any old wolf either. The head was huge, complete with a full head of hair and a mouth filled with sharp fangs. Pavel didn't want to just leave it there for anyone to find. I mean, imagine a young child coming across this thing. That would be traumatic. So he decided to hand it over to local scientists. They dated the wolf's head to over 40,000 years old, near the end of the Pleistocene epoch. Scientists also determined that the wolf was fully grown when it died, between 2 and 4 years old. According to Live Science, the decapitated head is over a foot long, roughly half the size of a modern wolf's body. This means that this wolf must have been huge. This recently discovered head is the first of its kind dating back to the Pleistocene. It's incredibly preserved, giving researchers a chance to study it and learn more about this long-extinct species. Other remains of ancient wolves have been found in the past, like the mummified wolf pup that was uncovered in Canada in 2016. And the year before that, scientists analyzed the split between wolves and dogs by using DNA that was extracted from a 35,000-year-old wolf rib bone from Siberia. Currently, scientists from the Swedish Museum of Natural History are examining the DNA from this new wolf head, comparing its genetic information to that of modern-day wolves. After its initial discovery, the head was briefly on display as part of an exhibition in Tokyo, which also featured the remains of woolly mammoths and other frozen animals. As research continues, more questions may be answered. But the biggest question I have is, where is the wolf's body? This guy was decapitated and whoever did it just left his head to freeze in the cold? We need more details. A dancing skeleton. Once you die, over time your body shrivels up and eventually there's nothing left but your bones. But surprisingly, bones can tell you a lot about a person. Let's take a look at this skeleton from Siberia that's been called the dancing skeleton. He was laid to rest in a position that made it seem like he was dancing into the afterlife. Archaeologists were amazed when they uncovered this man's grave in the village of Ust-Ivanovka. The man was tied up, his feet were crossed, and his knees were wide open. His arms were also crossed around his pelvis. If this guy hadn't been tied up, his extremities would have straightened out on their own. So, the people who buried him in this way did so for a reason. Whoever this was, he died sometime between the 7th and 9th centuries. It's not exactly clear how he died, but there is evidence to suggest that he was shot with an arrow. The tips of arrows were placed on the man's shoulders, but they weren't lodged in the man's body when he was buried. They were likely removed and then put on his shoulders, maybe as part of some kind of ritual. There was also an arrow tip found near the man's hips, extremely close to the bone. And given the confusing placement of these arrowheads, that's why archaeologists think they had something to do with his death. There is a large and important artery in your pelvis. If nicked or severed, the blood loss from the injury would be extremely detrimental, possibly even fatal if not taken care of quickly. According to anthropologists, the man was fairly short, measuring no taller than 5 feet. Other graves were found nearby, but the dancing skeleton's grave was unique, laid out in a distinct rectangular pattern. All the others were more circular. The grave was also covered in white sand that doesn't appear to be local. Most of the other graves contained the bodies of elderly people, aged from 50 to 70 years old, but the dancing man was just 30 years old when he died. He's believed to have belonged to the Mohe culture of the Tungusic ethnic group, native to China, Mongolia, and of course, Siberia. But that's just one theory at the moment, as further tests are needed to be 100% certain. This group of people were farmers. They grew crops, raised animals, and likely bred pigs. They were fairly peaceful, but like other cultures, if it came down to it, they would defend themselves. That was made clear by the discovery of some fortification and armament buildings within the vicinity of the gravesite. But maybe this guy wasn't much of a dancer at all. The positioning of his legs could suggest that he suffered from a deformity or an illness, like syphilis or maybe tuberculosis. People with mutations and deformities during medieval times were often avoided like the plague, but that's just how it was back then. So what do you think? Dancer or an illness? Let me know what you think in the comments. Dragon buckles. Belt buckles were all the rage hundreds of years ago. Back in the day, people would customize their belt buckles like people customize license plates today. Well, actually, we sort of customize everything today. Some of the most interesting buckles ever found were discovered in, you guessed it, Siberia. A tractor driver named Sergei Fevilov found the artifacts while he was plowing a field in the mid-1970s. At first, he thought the metallic pieces were just old tractor parts, but as he dug deeper, he uncovered something far more remarkable: 8 ancient belt buckles wrapped in birch bark. Little did Sergei know that he had unearthed a piece of ancient mythology from the modern-day Republic of Khakassia. These buckles, dating back to the end of the 1st millennium BC until the 2nd century AD, revealed the existence of a unique creature, the Siberian dragon. You didn't think these were just going to be some boring, rusty belt buckles, did you? Unlike the well-known dragons of Chinese lore, the Siberian dragon boasted its own distinct features and symbolism. Archaeologists and researchers were astounded by the intricate dragon imagery depicted on the buckles. They showcased a mythical creature in a serpentine pose. This was a symbol of protection and good fortune for whoever wore it. It was a fashion trend, like the trends we see today: crop tops, bell bottoms, you know. As experts delved deeper into the mystery, they uncovered fascinating connections between the Siberian dragon and ancient notions of calendars and astronomy. Nearby, in an area known as Sunduki, ancient astronomical observations were conducted at an observatory. A Chinese dictionary dating back to 200 AD says, on the day of spring equinox, the dragon flies through the sky. On the day of autumn equinox, it delves into abyss and covers in mud. Dr. Andrei Borodovsky from the Institute of Archaeology and Ethnography noted the significance of the Siberian dragon in the region's cultural identity. He stated that while Siberia was under strong Chinese influence during this time, the dragon buckles were likely locally produced. This means that ancient Siberians had their own unique version of dragons. The dragon's legacy, however, eventually faded away. It was replaced by copies of the more familiar Chinese dragons with their zigzag movements. But still, the discovery of these buckles is exciting. Thanks to the tractor driver, we now know more about Siberia's ancient mythology and cultural heritage. Zombie in the ice. Imagine waking up after 24,000 years of nap time. That's what happened to a tiny but mighty creature called the bedelloid rotifer. Found frozen in Siberia, this microscopic critter emerged from its icy slumber, ready to party. It's basically a zombie, but way cuter. B. rotifer is no ordinary microorganism. It's smaller than a speck of dust, measuring just a few micrometers in length. For comparison, that's tinier than the thickness of a piece of paper. Despite its size, this tiny titan can do things that us humans can only ever dream of. It can clone itself multiple times without needing a partner, a trick called parthenogenesis. Discovered by scientists in Russia, this rotifer's resurrection raises questions about how life can hang on for so long in the freezer. The soil where it was found has been frozen for millennia, dating back to the time when mammoths roamed the earth and humans were still figuring out how to make fire. So, how did this little guy survive all that time? The permafrost acted like a natural freezer, preserving it like you see in movies when someone enters cryosleep for hundreds or even thousands of years. Scientists think that creatures like this rotifer might have been trapped in the ice long ago, only emerging recently in January of 2024. The discovery has researchers buzzing with excitement. It's like finding a long-lost treasure buried in your backyard. While the rotifer's comeback is impressive, it's just the tip of the iceberg, or the permafrost in this case. Other frozen wonders, from prehistoric worms to woolly rhinos, have also thawed out and surprised scientists in recent years. Who knows what other ancient secrets are hiding beneath the ice? Siberia's Mystery Fort. There is a mysterious fortress in Siberia that looks like it came straight out of a fantasy novel. Its crumbling walls sit on a massive rectangular space on an island in the middle of a lake, but nobody really knows who built it or why. The story of Bazin dates back over 1,000 years, to a time when Siberia was a wild and untamed land, but still kind of is. With its mighty walls and sprawling layout, the ruins of the fortress stand as a testament to the mysterious past of this remote region. Over the centuries, Bazin has puzzled archaeologists and historians alike. Some believe it was built to defend against invaders, while others think it may have been a sacred site for pilgrims. So, what's the truth? The truth is, nobody knows. In the late 1800s, explorers set foot on the island and tried to unravel its secrets. They discovered that it was built using ancient Chinese techniques, hinting at a connection to distant lands and cultures. It could have been a place of great religious significance, perhaps housing monks, which would explain its extreme isolation. When examining old paintings from the Tang dynasty, the shape of the ruins looks a lot like palaces and Buddhist ideas of paradise. However, Buddhism wasn't the main religion in that area back then, so it's unclear who sponsored the construction of the fortress. As the years passed, more clues emerged. Radiocarbon dating revealed construction began in 777, during a time of great upheaval. But even with this new information, the true purpose of Bazin remains a mystery. In 2007, a team of scientists embarked on an expedition to excavate Bazin and uncovered secrets once and for all. But what they found only added to the mystery. They found evidence of earthquakes and fires that pointed towards a violent end for the fortress. But the final nail in the coffin is still poorly understood. Today, Bazin stands in shambles as a vigilant guardian, protecting the site's secrets from prying eyes. Despite centuries of study and speculation, the true purpose of this ancient fortress remains a question mark on Siberia's map. But perhaps one day its walls will finally reveal the truth. Until then, it remains one of Siberia's greatest mysteries. The Crystal Meteorite. When it comes to scientific discoveries, there are few tales as captivating as the saga of the quasi-crystal. It's a tiny but mighty meteorite that emerged from the depths of space to challenge our understanding of the universe itself. Our story begins in 2009 with the halls of the Italian Museum of Natural History in Florence. Here, a group of scientists stumbled upon a small grain of an extraterrestrial mineral that was stored in a box. Little did they know that this unassuming find would lead them on a journey spanning continents and millennia, unraveling the mysteries of our solar system's distant past. This celestial gem hailed from the remote reaches of eastern Siberia, near the imposing Koryak Mountains. Dubbed the Katrina meteorite, it bore witness to the tumultuous birth of our solar system some 4.5 billion years ago. Hidden within the meteorite was something truly mind-blowing, a discovery that shook the scientific world to its core. It was the revelation that quasi-crystals exist. This finding was a big deal, like finding out that aliens are real, but in rock form. Now you might be wondering, what is a quasi-crystal? It's like a crystal with its typical orderly arrangement of atoms stretching out in a symmetrical grid. But now imagine that same crystal with a twist. Quasi-crystals are all over the place, zigging and zagging in unexpected ways. Quasi-crystals are like the rock stars of the mineral world, flaunting shapes and configurations never before seen in nature. Simply put, quasi-crystals defy the conventions of traditional mineralogy. For decades, scientists believed that such exotic forms of matter were nothing more than theoretical pipe dreams. That is, until the discovery of the Katrina quasi-crystal shattered those ideas, like shards of crystal. Paul Steinhardt was the visionary physicist from Princeton University who spearheaded the quasi-crystal quest. With the help of Italian geologist Luca Bindi, Steinhardt assembled a team of scientists to scrutinize this celestial oddity. Together, they delved deep into the heart of the quasi-crystal, unlocking its secrets one atomic layer at a time. So, what did they find? Not only did they confirm the quasi-crystal's extraterrestrial origins, but they also unearthed clues about its cosmic journey. Embedded within a mineral called stishovite, the quasi-crystal contained the unmistakable signature of its meteoric birth, forged in the crucible of interstellar collisions eons ago. Fueled by their insatiable thirst for knowledge, Steinhardt and his comrades set out on an expedition to Siberia in 2011. Armed with pickaxes and a sense of scientific adventure, they searched the Kamchatka Peninsula in search of more quasi-crystals. And lo and behold, they found what they were looking for. Not one, not two, but 3 quasi-crystals were found nestled within the rocky embrace of the Katrina meteorite, each one showcasing the cosmic creativity that shapes our universe. With their unique molecular structures and mysterious origins, these celestial gems opened a window into the ancient history of our solar system. The giants of Patagonia. Have scientists found proof of an actual lost civilization of giant people? From the colossal Norse beings to the towering Greek titans, the biblical Goliath, or even the Chinese Pangu, giants have been mentioned in cultures all over the world throughout recorded history. Practically every country around the world has tales and myths about giants. And among all these tales, there is one unusual giant that stands out: the mysterious Cap d'Oie. For a long time, people have thought that Patagonia was home to giants. This belief goes back to a story told by the explorer Ferdinand Magellan. During his travels, Magellan stopped with his men on the beaches of South America. They had landed in Patagonia and went inland to explore. It's said that they encountered indigenous people who were twice the size of a normal human. This is likely because some of the natives living in the region, most notably the Tehuelche, did happen to be larger than the average European was back then. This height difference could have been exaggerated, leading to the lasting myth that Patagonia was once a land of giants. But was that really all it was? A myth? Could it be possible that a few real giants roamed the Patagonian landscapes in the past, with Cap d'Oie being an extraordinary example of said giants? Well, let's back up a bit. Let me tell you more about this mysterious Cap d'Oie. He was supposedly a 12-foot tall behemoth. He was a giant by any definition of the word. He towered above normal folk and likely terrified them. It wasn't just his height that was intimidating, though. It was the fact that he had 2 heads. There are 2 stories that seem to conflict with one another when trying to understand the origin of the Cap d'Oie giant. According to the first narrative, Spanish sailors encountered Cap d'Oie around the year 1673 on the beaches of Patagonia. The giant monstrosity was then captured and taken prisoner on their ship. The sailors supposedly strapped Cap d'Oie to the vessel's mast for the return trip home. However, the giant didn't stay shackled for long. He broke free of the mast and then turned his sights to his captors. He attacked them, but he didn't win the fight. Cap d'Oie was killed when a pike pierced his chest. Later on, in the 19th century, the giant's preserved body somehow found its way to Britain, then to the United States. And in America, Cap d'Oie became a focal point of countless freak shows and sideshows. The preserved body of a two-headed giant from a foreign land absolutely captivated audiences. On the other hand, an alternative account of the discovery of Cap d'Oie suggests that the giant was already dead when he was found on the Patagonian beach. Someone had impaled him through the chest with a spear. The death of Cap d'Oie is rather consistent in both stories. But in this version of events, Paraguay natives found the lifeless body and mummified it. They then incorporated the giant into their religious practices. But not long afterward, George Bickle, a British captain, heard about this unusual discovery. He then successfully infiltrated Paraguay and stole the remains of Cap d'Oie. And after the body snatching was done, he brought the giant's body back with him to Britain. In both versions, the body ends up in the possession of showmen who add the giant to their collection of curiosities. But there is still speculation as to the authenticity of this tale. Some believe the story to be genuine, but others are convinced that it's nothing but an elaborate hoax. If giants really did inhabit this region in the past, it would change everything we thought we knew about history. So, is there any actual evidence that titans existed in Chile and Argentina? There is. But again, this evidence is highly debated. The body of Cap d'Oie is just one piece of the puzzle. It's still around, kept on display at a museum in Baltimore, Maryland. Maybe you've seen it. Allegedly, the body was examined in the 1960s by physicians who claimed that it showed no obvious signs of it being a phony. But since then, no other experts have re-examined it. This is rather odd because you would think that scientists would be foaming at the mouth to analyze such a specimen, yet nobody seems interested. It's as if everyone has already made up their mind about Cap d'Oie being a convincing fake. There are also numerous giant footprints that have been found all over the globe. One such footprint was found in Paraguay. Scientists are beginning to dismiss these footprints though, saying that ancient peoples could have simply carved the prints by hand. But of all of the things to draw, why do all of these cultures choose to draw feet? What do you think about the possibility of giants living in Patagonia? Could the stories told by ancient explorers have some truth to them? Let me know what you think in the comments below. The bizarre star. Deep in space, 13,000 light-years away from Earth, scientists have stumbled upon a stellar mystery that could change everything we know about stars and how they die. They have found a very unusual star that has an elemental makeup that doesn't match any existing theories. Normally, a star this massive would collapse into a black hole, but not this one. Its discovery challenges our understanding of star explosions and how heavier elements in the universe are formed. It's like solving a cosmic puzzle that's been baffling astronomers for ages. The story began with Subrahmanyan Chandrasekhar's groundbreaking revelation that stars eventually die. Stars explode in supernovae, creating elements beyond hydrogen and helium, which eventually form new stars. But while studying data from the Sloan Digital Skies survey in 2023, researchers noticed something peculiar: a star behaving strangely. They used powerful telescopes to get a closer look and were very surprised. According to Alex G., the astronomer leading the investigation, everything about it was weird. The star's elemental composition hinted at a different kind of explosion, one we've never witnessed before. The star likely belonged to the universe's earliest stars, which exploded and gave birth to a new generation of stars, including the one that is now under scrutiny. Imagine witnessing this colossal explosion in the ancient skies, an event so powerful it could have dwarfed an entire galaxy. Another researcher on the team, Sanjana Curtis, explained that this discovery hints at a lost first generation of stars in the universe. It's like stellar archaeology, digging through the remnants of ancient stars to uncover secrets of the cosmos. In honor of this cosmic enigma, the scientists affectionately dubbed it the Barbenheimer star, a combination of the two biggest movies from the year of its discovery, Barbie and Oppenheimer. And now for a quick break because it's shoutout time! I want to give a big thank you again to Luciano. This helps us make more videos and more animations and all kinds of stuff, so thanks again! Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already for more videos like this. The Ica Geoglyphs. Get ready for a wild adventure deep into the heart of ancient Peru. This new archaeological discovery in the Ica region is about to blow your mind. For a long time, the Ica area was known as a hotbed of ancient astronomical and religious wonders. And now, researchers have found something truly amazing. A team of students and archaeologists from the local university just uncovered 29 massive geoglyphs depicting felines and human figures. These massive artworks, some stretching over 130 feet long, were etched into the hillsides around the districts of El Ingenio and Changuillo. These artworks are really old, from about 300 BC to 100 AD, when the Paracas and the Nazca cultures were around. Geoglyphs are those giant figures and designs that get carved into the landscape, like the famous Nazca lines. But these newfound feline and humanoid shapes take things to a whole new level of prehistoric awesomeness. According to the lead archaeologist Omar Bendezu, these massive carved felines were likely viewed as sacred deities by the people of that time. In fact, the team found that the geoglyphs are all oriented towards the legendary Nazca lines. So maybe they were part of some grand ancient ritual or cosmological system. And the best part is, this is just the start. The researchers want to keep studying these new sites to figure out exactly what they mean and why they're important. Who knows what other mind-blowing secrets about ancient Peruvian culture are still waiting to be found. From the famous Nazca lines to these colossal feline geoglyphs, it's clear that this part of the world was home to some seriously advanced ancient civilizations. And with technology like drones and specialized mapping software, archaeologists are finally able to uncover the full scale of these monumental prehistoric achievements. Looks like the great mysteries of ancient Peru continue. The more we know, it seems the less we know. Oldest long-necked marine reptile. Let's take a trip back in time to the age of sea monsters. The fossil of the mysterious marine reptile known as Trachylosaurus fischeri, close enough, has been hiding a remarkable secret. One that's just been uncovered by a team of paleontologists. Turns out it's the oldest long-necked reptile ever discovered. This peculiar creature was first discovered and described in the 19th century. It was found buried in layers of Middle Triassic rock in Berenberg an der Saal in Germany. The fossil has long puzzled scientists. But now, an international research group led by Dr. Stefan Speakman has cracked the case. And let me tell you, the results are nothing short of evolutionary dynamite. Trachylosaurus fischeri is like the grandpa of all the dinosaurs that have been found so far, dating back a whopping 247 million years. This find represents a crucial evolutionary development that occurred in the wake of the catastrophic Permian-Triassic mass extinction event. 90 to 96% of marine species and approximately 70% of terrestrial species were wiped out. But like a phoenix, from the ashes rose the Trachylosaurus. By comparing the German fossil to new discoveries from China, the researchers were able to link Trachylosaurus to a similar long-necked reptile called Dinocephalosaurus. This link helped them finally figure out how to classify this weird and ancient creature once and for all. The Trachylosaurus fossil itself is quite the specimen. Its skeleton is scattered and jumbled within the rock, but the researchers were able to discern its unusually high number of vertebrae, a key identifying feature. They even found ancient footprints of land animals preserved alongside the marine reptile's remains. This rediscovery is an important step toward unraveling the rapid diversification of life that took place after the Permian extinction. It just goes to show how much more there is to learn from revisiting and reanalyzing historical fossil collections. All those things get put in drawers for hundreds of years. Lost Valley of Cities. Archaeologists have just uncovered a mind-blowing ancient civilization deep in the Amazon rainforest. It's like something straight out of a movie. Looks like Indiana Jones needs to pack his bags and get back out there, because the hunt for lost cities and forgotten civilizations is far from over. Turns out, this lost world was home to at least 10,000 people who lived there around 2,000 years ago. That's around the same time as the Roman Empire over in Europe. Who knows, maybe the two civilizations knew about each other, although it's not likely. The first clues were spotted over 20 years ago by an archaeologist named Stefan Rostein. But back then, he wasn't sure what it all meant. Fast forward to 2023, and scientists have used some high-tech laser mapping to reveal the full extent of this ancient settlement. It was an entire network of villages, roads, and ceremonial structures, all hidden under the thick jungle canopy of Ecuador. The largest roads were over 30 feet wide and stretched for miles. And get this, there were over 6,000 earthen mounds that people lived and worshipped on. Researchers think this lost valley of cities was inhabited by a group called the Upano people for nearly a millennium, from around 500 BC to 600 AD. That's seriously impressive. At its height, some experts believe it may have been home to hundreds of thousands of people. It would have been the size of ancient London. Can you imagine the organizational skills and labor that would have been required to build this ancient Amazonian civilization? We're talking about a network of villages, ceremonial structures, and thousands of massive earthen mounds, all constructed without the benefit of modern machinery or technology. Building something on that scale in the dense Amazon jungle must have taken an incredible amount of coordinated planning and manpower. The people of this lost valley of cities had to organize large work crews, allocate resources, and execute complex construction projects across a wide area. The logistics of it all would have been an enormous undertaking. It just goes to show how advanced and sophisticated these Amazonian societies really were, way before Europeans ever showed up. This discovery is flipping our understanding of the region on its head. The Amazon is no longer just a pristine wilderness. It was teeming with complex civilizations all along. Archaeologists are still piecing together the full story, but it's clear that this lost world was a real powerhouse in its day. Who knows what other amazing ancient sites are still waiting to be uncovered in these rainforests? The Shroud of Turin. For years, there's been a big debate over whether a famous religious relic called the Shroud of Turin is the real deal or not. It's supposedly the burial shroud that wrapped the body of Jesus after his crucifixion. Scientists have argued for decades over its authenticity, but new scientific tests have just thrown a major curveball into the mix. The fresh debate started in 2023, just last year, when an American archaeologist named William Meacham got permission to study some tiny threads from the shroud. He sent them off to a lab in Hong Kong, and the results were astonishing. The flax used to make the linen fabric came from the Middle East, specifically the region that is now Israel, Lebanon, and parts of Syria and Jordan. This is a huge deal because it challenges the idea that the shroud was just some medieval forgery created in Europe. I mean, if the materials point to a Middle Eastern origin, that lines up a lot better with the shroud supposedly being Jesus' burial cloth, right? Well, that's what Meacham is claiming. Over the years, there's been all kinds of research and analysis done on the Shroud of Turin. In 1978, a team of American scientists got the rare chance to study it up close and personal for a whole week. They couldn't explain the mysterious image on the cloth, but they did confirm that it came from a real human body. Then, in the late 80s, some carbon dating tests seemed to date the shroud to the Middle Ages. But more recent studies in 2012 and 2015 have suggested that it could be from the time of Jesus after all. And get this, in 2017, a team of Italian forensic experts did a deep dive into the imprint and found evidence that it matches the injuries Jesus suffered during his crucifixion. They even think the cause of death was a heart attack brought on by the trauma. So what are we to make of all this? Well, the debate rages on, but this new evidence about the flax is a pretty big deal. It's making a lot of people rethink things. Could the Shroud of Turin really be the burial cloth of Jesus Christ himself? For now, the search for the truth continues. The Pharaoh's Medallion. There is an Egyptian pharaoh that may have been an alien. The discovery of an ancient medallion could change everything we thought we knew about Egypt's past. You may have heard of Pharaoh Akhenaten, and you definitely have if you've been watching this channel, but how much do you really know about him? We know that he ruled Egypt between 1353 and 1336 BC. Under his leadership, Egypt abandoned its traditional polytheism. Akhenaten introduced a new religion, Atenism, which centered around the worship of one deity, Aten, the sun god. But after Akhenaten's death, things went right back to the way they were before he took the throne. Apparently, people miss their old gods and goddesses too much. But what made him do this in the first place? What gave him the idea to worship one god and make everyone else do it with him? We also know that Akhenaten was pretty bizarre looking, and I'm not talking about funky fashion choices here. What I mean is that Akhenaten didn't look like a normal man. He had strange feminine hips and an elongated skull. He also had a pronounced chin and a nose that stood out in a crowd, if you know what I mean. He had long arms and a protruding tummy. Akhenaten's distinctive physique was definitely raising eyebrows back then. And here's where things get really interesting. Rumor has it that Akhenaten owned a mysterious medallion featuring a flying saucer and even the head of a gray alien. The medallion was supposedly discovered in an Egyptian tomb by a man named Professor Winwood. But that's about all anyone knows about this artifact. It's not clear when it was found or from what tomb it was excavated. Take a look at it for yourself and tell me what you think. Could this be evidence of extraterrestrial involvement in ancient Egypt? And if so, where is this mind-blowing medallion now? Well, unfortunately, it seems to have vanished into thin air, leaving us with more questions than answers. But hey, who doesn't love a good mystery? Some people have taken this medallion as proof that Akhenaten wasn't exactly who he claimed to be. Some even think that this could be evidence that he was an alien himself, or at least part alien. And given his bizarre appearance, it's no wonder why people think that. There is a whole lot of speculation surrounding ancient aliens and Akhenaten, and the debate is as heated as ever. From official stances to wild theories, everyone's got an opinion. What's yours? Let me know in the comments. Tiny worm, giant eyes. Get ready to dive into the bizarre and fascinating world of the Vanadis bristleworm. These little guys are evidence of just how insane evolution can get. They were recently discovered in the Mediterranean Sea. And man, are scientists excited. First, let's talk about how downright strange these marine worms are. They mainly live off the coast of Naples, Italy, a city that is no stranger to weirdness itself. But these worms really take the cake. They belong to a group called Polychaetes, which basically rule the seas with over 10,000 different species. And get this, they have somehow survived 5 mass extinctions. These critters are super resilient and adapt to nearly every environment they are placed in. Now, the most mind-blowing thing about the Vanadis worm is its eyes. I mean, they're massive, 20 times the size of its tiny head. Can you imagine if we had eyes that big? We would look crazy and probably need forklifts to get around. So scientists have been really curious about why these worms evolved such gigantic peepers. It turns out that the Vanadis worm has some seriously impressive eyesight, on par with mice and rats. And that's pretty incredible for a simple little worm with barely any brain at all. Researchers think these big eyes help the worm see in the dark at night when they come out to feed. And they might even be able to detect UV light and bioluminescent signals, things we humans can't see. The scientists think the worms might use this hypervision for some kind of secret communication, maybe related to mating. Imagine a bunch of these little worms flashing each other in the blackness of the deep sea, like some wild underwater nightclub. But the real kicker is that these worm eyes might hold the key to some groundbreaking technological innovations. Researchers are already working on trying to replicate the mechanisms behind the worm's vision, hoping to apply it to things like computer science and artificial intelligence. Their super simple nervous system somehow processes all this visual info like a champ. So cracking that code could be a game changer. I guess you can never underestimate the hidden genius lurking in the most unexpected of creatures. These Vanadis worms are making even the smartest scientists feel like they have a lot more to learn about the natural world. Bronze Age network of communities. Most archaeologists already knew that the biggest structures in the world, prior to the Iron Age, were Central Europe's Bronze Age megaforts. But what they didn't know was that those megaforts were connected together. Yep. In early 2024, archaeologists discovered that 100 massive sites were connected by a previously unknown network. They now believe that these sites were all stitched together, creating one massive and complex society. New satellite and aerial images unveiled the network. According to one of the authors of the study, Barry Malloy, the people living within this network of sites must have numbered into the tens of thousands. The communities living around these Bronze Age megaforts didn't stand alone. They were part of a closely related and codependent society. The discovery of these sites through the use of satellite imagery is a significant development in the field of technology-assisted archaeology. This mirrors the earlier identification of 396 undocumented Roman forts in Syria and Iraq using Cold War-era satellite data. That's right, just under 400 structures were found using satellites. Isn't that amazing? It's also kind of terrifying, right? Can these satellites peek into our homes too? Probably. These findings expand our understanding of ancient societal networks and settlement patterns across the region. By utilizing advanced remote sensing technologies, archaeologists are able to detect subtle landscape features. They can also find buried structures that would be difficult to identify through conventional field surveys. The new sites were all found near the Tisza River, and all of them were within 50 miles of each other. Through excavation, ground surveys, and geophysical prospection, the team concluded that most of the sites were established sometime between 1600 and 1450 BC. They were likely maintained until all of these megaforts were abandoned around 1200 BC. Because the sites were so close together, archaeologists believe that this wasn't a highly contested region between multiple kingdoms. Instead, they think it was a cooperative community that acted as a major hub for the region. Deep sea discovery. During an expedition in early 2024, just this year, off the coast of Chile, deep sea explorers unearthed over 100 potentially new species, adding to the immense wild diversity of ocean life. Each of the 10 seamounts they explored revealed a unique ecosystem, like uncovering different chapters in a thrilling underwater story. Dr. Seuss himself couldn't dream this stuff up. Picture ancient coral forests, clusters of sea urchins sporting cactus-like spikes, and gardens of glassy sponges clinging to underwater mountain ranges that soar thousands of feet from the ocean floor. This underwater expedition was no ordinary adventure. Using high-tech underwater robots, the research team dove more than 14,000 feet below the surface, collecting mysterious specimens from the deep. And now that they are back on dry land, scientists will study these creatures' body structures and genes. Among the newfound marine life are ghostly white sponges, lobsters with beady eyes and barbed legs, and a whole array of corals, sea urchins, sea stars, and sea lilies. From marine parks to uncharted waters, this expedition proves that there is still so much to explore beneath the ocean. Javier Seyanes, one of the scientists leading the charge, described the trip as hitting the jackpot for sea sponges. They discovered a bounty of marine life where only a few species were previously known. Ancient Kingdom Temple. Phanagoria is an ancient city that's located on the Taman Peninsula in southwestern Russia. This place was buzzing with life in the middle of the 6th century BC. It was founded by Greek settlers right by the Sea of Azov and the Black Sea. Something incredible was recently uncovered in the city by archaeologists. Can you guess what it was? I'll give you a clue. Jesus would have prayed here, and others would have gathered here to worship their god. They found a synagogue, one of the oldest synagogues ever discovered. Phanagoria wasn't just your average city. It flourished for more than 1,500 years and became a major hub in the region. It was even one of the important capitals of an ancient kingdom called the Bosporan Kingdom. This empire is sometimes called the Jewel of the Black Sea. The prosperity of the kingdom was mainly based on the export of fish, wheat, and slaves. But even though the Bosporans were basically human traffickers, they still made time to praise God, probably because they had a lot of repenting to do. This ancient synagogue was rectangular, about as big as a decent-sized living room, adorned with beautiful paintings and tiles. Inside, they discovered marble menorahs, tables used for religious ceremonies, and bits of fancy marble columns. Archaeologists found an inscription on a stela dating back to the 5th century AD that directly translates to synagogue in Greek. But earlier discoveries from the city, like marble tablets inscribed with the phrase House of Prayer, dated even further back to between 16 and 51 AD. This indicates that the synagogue in Phanagoria is one of the oldest in the world. And since he was alive around that time, maybe even Jesus himself stopped by at some point to check in with the big guy upstairs. This discovery tells us that Jewish life in Phanagoria was thriving way back in the 1st century AD, with signs of a strong Jewish community. Synagogues have been around since the 3rd century BC, but finding one from the 1st century AD is pretty rare. The Phanagoria synagogue stood proudly for over 500 years until the city met its unfortunate end. In the middle of the 6th century AD, some rowdy barbarian tribes pillaged and devastated Phanagoria, leaving it in shambles. The ancient city, before it was destroyed, served as a melting pot of religions and cultures, with evidence of Jewish, Christian, and other traditions coexisting peacefully. This discovery not only sheds light on ancient religious history, but also shows us how diverse and sophisticated ancient cities like Phanagoria really were. The Blinkerwall. In the depths of the Baltic Sea lies a surprising ancient find, a mysterious underwater wall known as Blinkerwall. It's believed to be Europe's oldest man-made megastructure. This extraordinary discovery challenges what we thought we knew about how Stone Age people hunted. Blinkerwall, which is made up of over 1,300 stones and 300 large boulders arranged on the seabed, is submerged nearly 70 feet underwater in the Bay of Mecklenburg. It dates back around 10,000 years. Researchers think Stone Age hunters built it to corral and guide reindeer, taking advantage of the animal's habit of following straight lines in the landscape. Our ancient ancestors were pretty clever. The wall likely served as a strategic pathway to lead reindeer towards waiting hunters. Talk about a sneaky move. Originally, it was on dry land near a lake where reindeer gathered, showing how early European hunter-gatherers understood their environment. While similar structures exist elsewhere, Blinkerwall's discovery is a big deal for the Baltic Sea region. It sheds light on a new aspect of prehistoric life. The wall was found during a routine sonar mapping in 2021 off the German coast. Blinkerwall's existence proves that sometimes archaeology can surprise us, and it hints at even more amazing finds hidden under the waves. As scientists explore further, we might learn even more about our ancient ancestors and their genius hunting techniques. Maybe they were a bit too good, because after that, a lot of ancient species went extinct. The lost network of Stone Age tunnels. The world may have been much more connected than we thought. 12,000 years ago, subterranean corridors wound like ancient subway networks underneath Europe. So many tunnels have been discovered that it's starting to look like there was a system of passages allowing people to move from Scotland all the way to Turkey without ever seeing daylight. Imagine the superhighways of today, only underground and made by Stone Age people. German archaeologist Dr. Heinrich Kusch said the evidence is everywhere. Tunnels have been found underneath hundreds of Neolithic settlements spread across the European continent. But were these tunnels truly connected? Was there an underground highway leading for hundreds of miles? And if so, who could have built it? I have 100 more questions, but I'm sure you do as well. So let's check out the facts. In Bavaria, Germany, hundreds of feet of underground tunnel networks have been discovered. However, they aren't fully intact. There are sections of the tunnels as if they had collapsed long ago, and only small portions of them remain. The tunnels have also been found in Austria, in the north of Scotland, and along the Mediterranean. Because they're in rough shape after so many thousands of years, many of the tunnels are tiny. A few of them are hardly big enough for a rabbit, and others are large enough for a person to squirm their way through. They don't all link anymore, but when looked at as a whole, they do form a vast underground network. Scientists have proposed a few explanations to make sense of the tunnels. Perhaps they were used as protective shelters. Prehistoric men and women may have hunkered inside tunnels to keep safe from vicious predators. They may have also been used to hide inside during times of war. Or maybe it was really hot, and the Stone Age people liked to relax beneath the dirt. Hey, I don't know. There's also a chance that these tunnels were seen as gateways to the underworld. Such a belief persisted throughout the ancient world. The Maya believed the hollow tunnels under the Yucatan Peninsula were passages to Xibalba, the Maya realm of the death gods. What do you think the tunnels were for? Let me know in the comments. The disappearing Antarctic cave. A cave has been discovered in Antarctica that defies all explanation. It has some people wondering what the government is hiding. Nobody can agree on if this cave is the entrance to a secret military base or a buried city from a lost civilization. Here is a satellite image of the cave in Antarctica. Doesn't it kind of look like a vehicle has been going in and out of it, melting the snow out front like a driveway? One conspiracy theorist by the name of Blake Cousins said he believed the cave was an entrance to Hollow Earth. 6 months later, the cave vanished. Here's an image of the exact same spot in Antarctica taken later. Why would the entrance to the cave randomly vanish? Some think it may have been a door that closed and was then covered over in ice. When the cavern's entrance was first visible, it measured about 74 feet high. It was also about 249 feet wide, making it plenty big enough to fit a large spaceship inside. The sighting of the strange portal to the sublayer of Antarctica was spotted on Greenwich Island. If you like searching for mysterious things on Google Earth, I highly suggest checking out this island for yourself periodically to see what you find. And if it's suspicious, be sure to let us know in the comments. And now for a quick break, because it's shout-out time! I want to give a huge thank you to Jerry Bush for the super thanks. It really helps us a lot, and we wouldn't be here without you guys. If you're new here, be sure to subscribe for more videos like these. Hidden Nazi artifacts. A hidden trove of disturbing artifacts was recently discovered in Argentina. In a hidden room inside somebody's house, authorities found the biggest collection of Nazi artifacts in the country's history. You're going to be blown away by these bizarre relics. In total, about 75 objects were taken from the collector's home in Becar, a suburb just north of Buenos Aires. According to local authorities, many of the objects originally belonged to some of the most high-ranking Nazis in Germany during World War II. Some of the objects include a relief of Adolf Hitler, magnifying glasses kept in boxes with swastikas on them, and one horrific medical device called a caliper. The caliper was a head measurement tool used during an archaic era of science, to say the least. Nazis believed the size of a human cranium was directly indicative of their intellectual capacity, but in reality, it was just another way for the Nazis to justify their Aryan ideas of being a superior race. Police in Argentina did not name any of the Nazis whom the objects may have belonged to originally. They want to be sure to be very careful and not promote them in any way. They did show pictures though, like this one of a knife with Nazi markings, or this one here of a huge hourglass with the Nazi emblem on it, shared by Natasha Pisarenko from the Associated Press. What do you think? Should objects like this be destroyed, placed into a museum, or kept in a secure police vault, never to be seen again? What do you think should be done with dark historical artifacts? Let me know what you think in the comments. The gruesome mystery at the bottom of the well. A new DNA analysis has solved the mystery of some bodies that were discovered at the bottom of a creepy medieval well. This ancient tale of intrigue is going to shock and maybe even disturb you, so be careful. It all began in 2004 when construction workers broke ground on a new shopping mall in Norwich, England. The workers hadn't anticipated, not in a million years, that they would find 17 bodies at the bottom of a well. That well turned out to be 800 years old. As you can likely imagine, archaeologists were called in to investigate. I don't think it's in most construction workers' job descriptions to excavate ancient corpses. It was a long but fruitful investigation. Archaeologists identified the remains of 6 adults and 11 children. However, they weren't able to make any sense of the burial. For the last 20 years, scientists have struggled to understand why these people wound up at the bottom of the well. Here are some of the curious facts. This was clearly a mass burial, yet it wasn't like other mass burials. Usually the bodies are arranged uniformly. They are laid out like neatly layered sardines in a can. In this case, the dead were all thrown headfirst into the well with total disregard for how they landed. To understand the intricacies of this mystery, scientists turned to DNA sequencing. The first big break came when they realized that 4 of the adults were related, with 3 of them being sisters. The next big break came when the genetic material showed the 6 adults were all most likely Ashkenazi Jews. This was a turning point in the case. It also led researchers to a dark and daunting time in medieval history. It's believed the 17 people in the well were killed during a burst of anti-Semitic violence in February 1190. Selena Brace from the Natural History Museum in London said she was both delighted and relieved that technology finally caught up enough for her to understand the historical cold case. But it doesn't make the case any less terrifying. The DNA analysis revealed very specific markers in the medieval skeletons, such as Tay-Sachs disease. This is something known to have affected Ashkenazi Jewish groups in the 12th century because they frequently married within their own community. The genetic study also revealed the people buried in the well likely had blue eyes and red hair, which were also features of European Jews 800 years ago. And then there is the Chronicle, a medieval manuscript called Imaginis Historiarum II, written by Ralph de Diceto, describes a massacre that took place in Norwich during the Third Crusade. The chronicler wrote that the Jews living in Norwich were hunted down and butchered in their own houses. The people in the well had likely been victims of bad assault. During the Third Crusade in Europe, tensions were very high. King Henry II of England and King Philip II of France put aside their differences to lead a new crusade against the Muslims who had taken over Jerusalem. Anyone who was not strictly a Christian was considered an enemy, and not only in the Holy Land, but everywhere in Europe, even as far away as the UK. Decoding the human genome. Scientists may have finally figured out that ancient civilizations understood how to alter human DNA. It could confirm the theory that ancient aliens arrived on Earth and then tampered with human genetic material. Take a look at this relief panel kept at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in Manhattan, New York. It shows the Anunnaki Tree of Life from Mesopotamian mythology. But if you look closely, you'll notice the Tree of Life is shaped kind of like a DNA helix. Let me know what you think. This isn't the only example. Ancient carvings across the world depict the double helix motif of DNA. This would be an impossible thing for ancient people to even know about unless they had access to technology. There is no way they just guessed the double helix. Now I'm going to get a little scientific, sort of. There isn't a whole lot scientists know about the bulk of human DNA. For example, scientists in the past couple of years have been releasing new theories on something they are calling dark matter DNA. Much like the dark matter scientists believe permeates the universe, dark matter DNA is believed to make up a massive part of our DNA. Not just humans, but also the DNA of mice and chickens and everything else that's alive. Dark matter DNA could be essential to life. Yet scientists don't know how it works or how it's formed. Some scientists estimate that only 2% of our DNA has been properly decoded. That means that 98% of our genetic material is a mystery, even in 2024. It's not that surprising, though, when you consider scientists still don't know how consciousness works or dreams. The fun question is, what if ancient civilizations understood something about DNA that has been lost in the modern world? Could this secret knowledge explain the double helix motifs of Mesopotamia? In 1995, Russian quantum scientist Vladimir Poponin claimed human DNA directly influences the physical world. Vladimir was able to view human DNA directly impacting photons in a controlled environment. 2 years earlier, in 1993, the U.S. Army investigated DNA samples reacting to the emotions of their human donors. They took blood samples from people and then noticed the samples reacting when the people experienced intense emotions. Even separated from the body, the DNA appeared to be affected by the person's mental state. Although the truth of human DNA remains a mystery, scientists are making headway. Perhaps in the next few years, they'll learn more about dark matter DNA. The Legendary Hussars. The Hungarian Hussars were fearless warriors from the Middle Ages. They've also been immortalized as fantasy heroes. These audacious men are national symbols of bravery in Hungary. But what's the truth behind Hungary's answer to the berserkers of the Vikings? Archaeologists in Poland recently discovered some scraps of armor from the 17th century. They uncovered 2 bracers, a left shoulder pad, a clavicle piece to protect the neck, and a semicircular helmet. The armor scraps are in terrible shape, rusted and dirty, but they are legit pieces of Hussar armor from the 17th century. The armor pieces were found in a district that I can't pronounce the name during a dig and are expected to go on display at the Castle Museum. Now let me tell you why these pieces of armor are so exciting. They belong to the Hussars, who first appeared when the Turks invaded Hungary in the 15th century. The first mention of them is in a letter from 1481, describing the Hussars as a light cavalry unit within King Matthias's royal army. What happened next is a little vague. They were a seemingly undefeatable unit under the king, but by the 16th century they had taken on a new role. They fought across Europe during the reign of the Habsburg monarchs as mercenaries. Mercenaries were very popular. If you had enough money in 16th century Europe, you could buy your own army, and the best of the best were the Hussars. They had a unique fighting style, utilizing light horses until the invention of pistols. During the rule of Queen Maria Theresa in the 18th century, the Hussars learned to fight on foot with guns. The Hussars were like Hungarian samurai. They were exceptional warriors who started in the Middle Ages with steel and evolved to use modern weaponry. The Hussars fought in the 1848 War of Independence. They battled in World War I, and the very last regiment of Hussars was disbanded at the end of World War II, putting a nail in the coffin of 500 years of regal warriors. Now you understand why finding even a few rusty pieces of Hussar armor is so amazing. New heat scans of the Great Pyramid. Scientists have discovered very unusual heat signatures while scanning the Great Pyramid of Giza. They are being called thermal anomalies. Anomalies which scientists believe could lead to a previously unknown chamber within the pyramid. This is an incredible find, and one that's been really difficult to explain. According to Egypt's official antiquities ministry, the scanning project identified 3 very specific thermal anomalies. 3 huge stones were captured practically glowing with heat on thermal cameras. It's possible that behind the unusually warm stones are chambers that have for centuries been hiding from everybody. What's even crazier is that the discovery was made just a few weeks after similar anomalies were identified in the tomb of Tutankhamun in the Valley of the Kings. It's possible a similar unknown chamber is hiding behind one of the walls of King Tut's tomb. The scientists involved with the project came from all over the world, from places like Canada and Japan and France, to scan the pyramids. They said the 3 mystery blocks they identified have a temperature 6 degrees higher than the other, which is a big difference. The scientists said the heat could be coming from hot air moving through the pyramid or from another material behind the stones. They just can't say for sure. Here are the hot stones taken straight from the thermal camera by Nariman El-Mofty. There is another interesting layer to the story I think you should know about. The very first row of the pyramid stones are uniform, just as you would expect them to be. But when you move a little bit deeper to where the thermal anomalies are, the stones suddenly get wonky. They aren't uniform anymore, making it impossible to tell if there are secret passages or tunnels leading below the structure. As much as I hate to say it, we might never know the truth about the pyramid, unless we dismantle the whole thing. The Temple of the Thunder God. One of the coolest discoveries of the last year was made in Iraq, in the ancient city of Girzu. What I'm about to show you is ancient and epic. It's a temple dedicated to a mighty thunder god who ruled thousands of years before Christianity ever existed. Only there's hardly any trace of it left. Take a look at this aerial shot of this mud brick temple from the British Museum. Don't think about the temple, think about the landscape. Look at how dry and empty it is, with a single dirt trail leading to the excavation site. Try to imagine how hard it must be for archaeologists to pinpoint where ancient structures are in such a barren place. Before the excavation started, the ruins of the temple were completely buried underneath terrain that looks as empty as the salt flats of Death Valley. But the area isn't empty. The temple is in the middle of the lost city of Girzu. The temple researchers found is from 4,500 years ago. Back then, aerial photographs would have looked a lot different had the technology been around. You would have seen citadels, palaces, temples, residential districts. This wasn't a desert like it is now. It was a thriving metropolis, the dawn of civilization. The city would have extended as far as the eye could see. The temple itself, according to curator Sebastian Ray at the British Museum, was dedicated to Ningirsu, god of springtime thunder. It may have been one of the most important sacred spaces in all of Mesopotamia. It was definitely the holiest place in Girzu, as Ningirsu was the city's chief deity. Notice the similarities between the names, Girsu and Ningirsu. Experts have known about the city since it was discovered in 1877 by French archaeologist Ernest Sarzec, but the rules of archaeology were pretty murky back then. It was the Wild West days, when Tomb Raiders and Indiana Jones types ran rampant. As a result, Ernest took everything of value he could carry away with him, including an epic statue of King Gudea from roughly 5,000 years ago. In modern times, people didn't think there was much left to find, but Sebastian Rey had a hunch there were more secrets to reveal at Girzu, and he was right. The temple was slowly unveiled over 5 seasons of excavations. Unfortunately, though, there is one important piece missing. There had originally been an enormous statue of Ningirsu inside the inner sanctum. It may have been so big that it would have rivaled the statue of Zeus in Greece. And that's one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, the Dinosaur Frog. In Brazil, paleontologists recently identified a new species of dinosaur frog. But is this thing more dinosaur or more frog? Here is a reconstruction of the newly identified Barobutrachus santos doroi from Lautaro R. Blanco. You wouldn't know the frog was prehistoric unless somebody told you. It just looks like an ordinary frog. However, this fantastic amphibian was alive in the late Cretaceous era at the end of the dinosaur age. How did researchers stumble upon such a froggy creature? In the state of Sao Paulo, paleontologists recovered its fossilized remains from the Adamantina Formation. It's the first frog of its kind found in the state. The bug-eyed amphibian is not going to change history or reveal some lost secrets of prehistory. It's just a really cool frog that scientists know almost nothing about, and I thought you'd like to see it. Strange ancient gears or keys to the unknown. Of all the relics discovered in South America, the bronze gears of ancient Peru might just be the most mystifying. Nearly nothing is known about the gears. For example, they might not even be gears. They look like toothy cogs you might find in a small piece of machinery, or like pieces from a watch, but they are supposedly thousands of years old. Experts can't agree on if they were used as decorative items or as keys to open portals to the realm of the gods. This is the only image floating around of the gears, and nobody even knows who took it. I can't even tell you where they were found because there was no reliable information. This is one of those weird cases that people have been talking about for decades. Realistic enough to be believable, but lacking any shred of evidence. For the sake of argument, let's assume the bronze gears were found in Peru and they are a couple thousand years old. Many comparisons have been made between the Peruvian gears and the bits and pieces of the Antikythera mechanism. The Antikythera mechanism was found on the ocean floor of the Mediterranean Sea in 1901. The year after, archaeologist Valerio Stais identified the object as containing tiny gears. The largest of these gears had 223 teeth and was about 5 inches in diameter. Over the last 120 years, scientists have relentlessly studied the mysterious mechanism. A team from Cardiff University used X-ray tomography in 2008 to get an in-depth look at what scientists now accept was the first computer. It had 37 meshing bronze gears that allowed it to track the movements of the moon and the sun. It could even predict eclipses. This wouldn't be as impressive if not for the fact the Antikythera mechanism was built in the 2nd century BC. 200 years before Christ, a Greek built a computer that could track the stars. Could the Peruvian gears have been part of a similar machine? One theory is that they were used at Puerta de Ayumarca as keys to unlock it. The bizarre door in Ayumarca, not far from Lake Titicaca, seems to go nowhere. It's one of several weird doors across Peru that were carved hundreds of years ago for no apparent reason. Some believe the ancient Andeans once had machines that could activate the doors, turning them into stargates. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. The Blacksmith's Workshop. Archaeologists have found an actual blacksmith's workshop from 2,700 years ago. But what did it look like? Was the workshop like what you see in the movies, with a burly blacksmith standing over an anvil in a cluttered, sooty shop? Archaeologists think it was a little more refined than that. No pun intended. The team of scientists from Dig Ventures uncovered the blacksmith's shop in Oxfordshire, England. They think it dates back to the earliest days of ironworking in all of Britain. Right right at the start of the Iron Age. The researchers uncovered a hammer scale, an iron bar, pieces of hearth lining, and an intact tuyere. A tuyere was sort of like a nozzle, which air was pushed through to feed oxygen into a smelter or a forge. The discoveries indicate a surprisingly large iron-working operation. This wasn't a blacksmith shop like you see in video games where there's one guy banging away at a new sword. This shop was industrial in scale and likely required many people working at once. There was smelting, forging, and refining all happening at the same time. In fact, the workshop was so big that archaeologists think it belonged to a master ironworker. This would have been around 771 BC, just a few decades after ironworking arrived in Britain in 800 BC. Could you name a few things crafted in a master ironworker shop? Swords, yes, and definitely tools, but there would have also been cartwheels made and other everyday objects. But you probably already know that from video games. It wasn't humans who made these tools. Excavations have been going on for the last few years at a site near Lake Victoria in Kenya. The experts working at the site have been finding a lot of amazing things, especially stone tools. But things might not be as they appear. The tools found at this site are likely the oldest ever discovered anywhere in the world, at just under 3 billion years old. The tools, known as Aldewan tools, were used for butchering and processing animals, and for processing plant matter. For example, butchering a hippo to get at its delicious meat, or pounding an edible plant into a more edible form. Scientists know without a doubt that these tools represent a massive leap forward in technology. They are the first pieces of technology crafted by human hands. But wait a second, that's not entirely true. It was assumed the tools were made by humans until very recently. One thing that bothered scientists while excavating the site, known as Nyayanga, was that they never found any human fossils. They didn't find any fossilized remains of human ancestors either, no Neanderthals or other early relatives of ours. But they did find 2 giant molars near the tools. The molars belonged to an extinct creature that was more ape than man. It's called Paranthropus and was completely different from anything related to the Homo genus. This thing is way out there on the family tree, perched on a lonely branch of humanity far removed from our own. This is one of those discoveries that really does change history. It was made thanks to researchers from prestigious places like the Smithsonian National Museum of Natural History, Queen's College, Liverpool John Moores University, and many others. They all agree that Paranthropus molars being found at the same site as Aldewan tools is remarkable. But what does it mean? The logical conclusion is that the oldest toolkit in the world was used by an extinct ape-like creature about 2.9 million years ago. Apparently, this thing looked exactly like Bigfoot. Here is a forensic reconstruction of Paranthropus boisei from Cicero Morais. Doesn't that look like Bigfoot to you? The implication is that humans weren't that special. Other creatures able to use tools were evolving millions of years before we ever even walked upright. The puzzling burial of a lynx. 1,500 years ago, a lynx was buried in an early medieval settlement. Rome had only recently fallen, and the Dark Ages weren't quite over yet. The villagers of a gloomy, cold, and likely pretty spooky settlement in Hungary dug a pit about 4.6 feet deep. It was lost until archaeologists recently dug it up, and what they found was shocking. The burial was for a lynx, but the big cat wasn't the only creature in the grave. The lynx was at the bottom, and there were the skeletons of 4 dogs on top of it. They were most likely German shepherds, layered between sections of dirt like a disturbing corpse cake. What researchers are struggling to understand is why. One guess is that the mysterious Hungarian villagers were involved in a lynx cult, perhaps worshipping the wild cat. There aren't many of these left in Europe now, with the species on the verge of extinction. But in the Middle Ages, they were widespread. There have even been other bizarre lynx burials found in other places. One of the archaeologists involved in the study said that lynxes have been found in Europe and Asia. Sometimes archaeologists discover lynx claws in human graves, and sometimes their pelt. There is evidence that people were obsessed with the cat in ancient times. But then, what did the dogs have to do with it? 2 of the dogs in the grave were female, and the other 2 were male. Nobody can agree if this has ritual significance or if the dogs were killed by the lynx. Either way, the whole thing is really weird. The acid spitter. Researchers in Mexico have discovered an entirely new species of scorpion-like creature that can spit acid from its tail. Yes, it is just as terrifying as it sounds. Experts were combing through a pine forest in Mexico in search of giant vinegaroons, a freakish arachnid that can grow to the size of your whole hand, and then one scurried out from beneath a rotten log and right into the hands of a researcher. Only this arachnid was an entirely new species. Usually you need a four-leaf clover to get that lucky. In the study published by researchers in the Journal of Archaeology, they discussed the newly discovered creature. It is a type of whip scorpion, an arachnid known as Phelitoneida. They named it Mastigoproctus zetame. The terrifying bug is only a few inches long, but that doesn't make it any less scary. It has what's known as a flagellum, which is sort of like a tail but a lot grosser. Instead of excreting venom like a scorpion's tail, the whip scorpion excretes a mix of water and acid. Why squirt acid from your tail? Why not? Scientists think it's to scare away predators. It's a pretty good mechanism. If someone or something squirted acid at me, I'd probably leave them alone too. There is not a large chance of you bumping into one of these newly found arachnids. They live in the pine forest of Jalisco, where they spend most of their time hiding under rocks and logs, minding their business. A massive footprint in the stone. Near the border of Swaziland, South African writer Michael Tellinger took an incredible video of himself standing next to the footprint of a giant who would have stood 27 feet tall. It's one of the craziest things you've ever seen, defying all explanation. The footprint is clearly enormous and obviously human-shaped. The only weird part is that it's vertical on the side of a cliff, looking like a giant drop-kicked the rock. Michael said the imprint is one of the greatest examples of an ancient footprint ever found in rough granite. It's more than 4 feet high. Not everyone is convinced of the footprint's authenticity. Chemist Dr. J. Weil said it is almost certainly not a footprint. Garth Mitchell also disputed the claim. He said it's ridiculous to believe living beings of such great height existed 3 billion years ago when the rock was allegedly formed. Garth said there was so little oxygen in the atmosphere of the planet that there is no way such a complex creature could have lived. That being said, 3 billion is a tentative number. The rock could be as young as 200 million years old, when there were creatures far larger than 27 feet roaming the Earth. If giant lizards or dinosaurs could grow up to 100 feet long, why couldn't there have been primitive 27-foot-tall giant humans, or at least human-like creatures? The controversy hasn't stopped visitors from seeking the footprint out in South Africa and leaving coins in its heel for good luck. The footprint has become quite the attraction. Noah's Ark found? After thousands of years, we may have just found Noah's Ark. After a year of analyzing a mysterious rock formation in Turkey, a team of scientists from 3 universities announced the discovery of something incredible. They found proof that between 5500 and 3000 BC, there were humans in the Ararat Mountains. This is the latest evidence that could prove Noah's Ark was real. The boat, the animals, the flood, the whole story. The Duru Pinar Formation isn't just a geological formation. It's said to be the imprint left behind by Noah's boat when it landed in the mountains. You can see in pictures of the formation that it does look like the imprint of a boat. It's 538 feet long, which is extremely close to the size of Noah's Ark, according to the Bible. Biblical scholars think that when Noah's Ark landed at this precise location, its hull left behind the markings that can still be seen today. However, the issue has always been with mainstream archaeologists not finding any physical evidence of a giant boat. The imprint is convincing, but they haven't found anything else to suggest that people were even here. It's hard to tell because when the Ark landed, Noah and his family supposedly took all the material from the Ark to build the first town. There wouldn't really be any of it left. But new technology can reveal all kinds of surprises. The project started in 2021 as a collaboration between 3 universities in Turkey and America. The team started by extracting rock and soil samples to analyze, and surprise, surprise, they found evidence of human activity, particularly in the form of seafood. This discovery suggests that humans were living around the formation and eating lots of food from the sea. That's sort of incredible, seeing as the mountains are nowhere near the ocean, located about 2 miles from the border of Iran. The authors of the study were very clear that they didn't find any explicit evidence of the boat itself. They only found evidence that people were here and that they appear to have been eating seafood. Maybe it was Noah and his descendants munching on clams and lobsters living in the bones of the Ark on Mount Ararat as the floodwaters subsided. Or maybe they were just prehistoric cave people. I'll let you decide. Did the crucifixion really happen? The crucifixion is sometimes a very heated topic. While crucifixions are mentioned in many ancient texts, and Roman historians Josephus and Appian refer to the crucifixion of thousands of Jews by the Romans, there are actually very few archaeological remains. Physical proof is extremely scarce. The most famous crucifixion is that of Jesus Christ, but he was not the only one who died that way. Crucifixion was a common form of capital punishment for criminals and slaves in ancient Roman times. It was considered one of the most brutal and shameful ways to die, reserved for the worst of the worst. This practice probably began with the Assyrians and Babylonians, but was also practiced systematically by the Persians in the 6th century BC. Alexander the Great saw the practice when he invaded Persia and spread it across the Mediterranean. Since this way to die was so shameful, the Romans reserved it for rebel slaves, disgraced soldiers, foreigners, political activists, Jewish people, and Christians. So what evidence do we have that the crucifixion of Jesus actually happened? Ancient historian Josephus said that when the Romans attacked Jerusalem, they crucified 500 Jews a day. 500 in a day? That feels like a lot. Josephus also claimed that 800 Pharisees were crucified in a single day while their children and wives were forced to watch. The same event is detailed in the Dead Sea Scrolls. But can you really call that proof? There are only 2 archaeological discoveries that have been found that provide direct evidence. In a town near Venice, archaeologists were doing their normal excavations to prepare for a new pipeline when they found the body of a man buried 2,000 years ago that showed signs he had died after being nailed to a wooden cross. It's not 100% certain since the bones are in very bad condition, but there is an unhealed fracture on one of the heel bones that suggests his feet had been nailed to a cross. The only other time that the remains of a crucifixion victim have been found was in 1968. Archaeologists were excavating Roman-era tombs in Jerusalem when they found a skeleton with a 7-inch-long nail sticking through the heel bone. The team, led by Greek archaeologist Vasilios Tsaferis, said the nail was found in place within the bone, attached to a small piece of olive wood, part of the wooden cross where the man had been hung to die. The bone is now held by the Israel Antiquities Authority and displayed in the Israel Museum. Finding King Solomon. King Solomon is one of the oldest figures in the Bible. He's believed to have lived 3,000 years ago. He was the father of David, the lover of the Queen of Sheba, and supposedly a great magician. But was he real? The answer could be yes, all thanks to a few ancient characters discovered inscribed into the side of an earthenware jug. Archaeologists found the jug in Israel. The characters appear to be the earliest alphabetical written text ever found in Jerusalem. This thing is 3,000 years old, dating to when King Solomon should have been alive. Professor Gershon Galil from the University of Haifa said the inscription proves that when it comes to the Bible, the book is talking about real kings. The kingdom of David and Solomon was as real as it gets. But other archaeologists are a little doubtful. Gershon is the only one who has come up with a translation of the text on the earthenware jug, making him seem a little suspicious. Gershon said the text reads, "inferior wine." But wait, how does inferior wine prove that a biblical king was real? Gershon said the writing demonstrates the existence of a functioning administration in the 10th century BC. The Bible says that King Solomon built a temple and enlarged the city. But outside of biblical texts, there is no evidence that Solomon ordered the construction of the first temple or did anything else. The jug indicates that people could have been writing the Old Testament in the 10th century as the events were unfolding. It's an exciting proposal, but still a little lacking in evidence. Gershon said that he hopes in the next few years, more physical evidence will be found confirming that Solomon and David were real earthly kings. And now for number 9. But first, I want to give a big shout out to Crystal Matrix and Joe Dross. Thanks so much for watching and supporting Origins Explained. If you are new here, be sure to subscribe and join the family. The real black pharaohs of the Bible. Fishing boats are mentioned a lot in the Gospels, but not nearly as much as Egypt is mentioned in the Hebrew Bible. Egypt comes up nearly 700 times, making it a hot topic to whoever wrote the Old Testament. Of all the mentions of Egypt, there is one person in particular that I want to tell you about. The Bible mentions Pharaoh Taharka, who was called to the aid of the kingdom of Judah to wage war against King Sennacherib of Assyria. This was shortly after Taharka came to power in 690 BC. The event isn't just a legend either. Professor Tom Meyer from the Shasta Bible College in California said that there is archaeological evidence of the pharaoh and his alliance with the kingdom of Judah. Taharka wasn't your average Egyptian pharaoh. He was a Nubian pharaoh, a king with dark black skin who originated from modern Sudan. In the 25th dynasty, a line of Nubian rulers took over Egypt for about 100 years. Today, they are commonly known as the Black Pharaohs, and they appear in the Bible. The Bible says that at first, Pharaoh Taharka remained neutral in the war being waged between Assyria and Judah, but he eventually came to help King Hezekiah, secretly plotting to attack Assyria from the south. It was a bad move though. Joining forces with Judah only made Assyria angry and vengeful. 4 years after Taharka was forced to flee to his capital at Thebes, the Assyrians attacked, and Taharka was overthrown in 664 BC. This whole story unfolds much slower than the Bible, with a bit more of that Old Testament pizzazz. The reason I'm telling you about it is that all the players are proven as real historical figures thanks to archaeological sources. I won't get into details about Hezekiah and Sennacherib, that could be for another video, but I will tell you about the Sphinx of Taharka. This incredible Sphinx features a blend of Egyptian and Nubian designs. Just look at it on display at the British Museum. The statue is obviously a Sphinx, but it has a distinctive Nubian flair. The Sphinx was found at the Temple of Amun in Nubia and appears to have been made for Pharaoh Taharka. It proves he existed as a real flesh and blood king. Taharka was also the last of the Nubian kings to rule Egypt. He worshipped the god Amun, built pyramids, and had his officials write in Egyptian hieroglyphics. Nubia and Egypt were pretty tight for a while. Destroyed city. Scientists have used the very magnetic field of the planet to confirm a brutal and bloody tale from the Bible. You're going to love this one. The Bible says that Gath was one of the main Philistine cities and home of Goliath, but the Bible doesn't go into very many details about it. In the Book of Kings, the destruction of Gath is glossed over in less than one verse. If you drift off for a second while reading, you go right past it. Archaeologists have worked long and hard to understand what happened in the ancient city of Gath, yet they can hardly figure out how old it even is. Gath was definitely a real place, standing within what is now the Tel Zafit National Park in Israel. It's currently in ruins, with little left except for burned mud bricks, some fragmented weapons lashed together from animal bones, and some broken walls. 10,000 people lived in Gath until one day it suddenly ceased to exist. A team of scientists from Tel Aviv University decided they would use a new method to date Gath to learn more. They would use the magnetic field of the planet. Things are going to get a little geological for a minute. Thousands of miles underneath the crust of the planet is the boundary between the solid inner core and the molten outer core. This boundary is a very hot place, almost 11,000 degrees Fahrenheit. That means it's hotter than the surface of the sun. The surface of the sun is about 10,000 degrees Fahrenheit. On one side of that barrier, the molten outer core is constantly animated. It's like bubbling magma, superheated liquid rock made of iron and nickel. It creates so much motion that it generates a protective magnetic field. If the molten outer core ever cooled down for some reason, our protective barrier would be destroyed, and with it, all life on the planet would be destroyed. The magnetic field protects us from solar winds, coronal ejections, and cosmic rays. Scientists have figured out how to use the magnetic field to measure the age of rock. When rocks are heated enough, they record the intensity and direction of the magnetic field at the time. Like at Gath, where an epic fire baked the mud bricks of the city to more than 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. The heat aligned the baked bricks with the Earth's magnetic field, giving scientists a way to date them. The team discovered that Gath was destroyed 2,800 years ago. That was at the exact same time King Hazael, the ruler of Damascus, was destroying cities in Judah and Israel. His name appears in the Bible, but historians also know he was a real king, and it may have been one of his campaigns that led to the destruction of Gath. Using the magnetic field, the scientists from Tel Aviv University started dating other cities that were destroyed. Cities like Tel Rehov and Horvat Tevet were annihilated by King Hazael. Then they took things a step further and confirmed the destruction of Tel Beth-Shean 100 years earlier, likely at the hands of Pharaoh Shoshenq I. And fun fact, he also appears in the Bible. Thanks to some boiling magma way beneath our feet, scientists now know certain tales of biblical destruction are rooted in reality. The double destruction of Jerusalem. Breaking news! Researchers have just found proof of the destruction of Jerusalem. They are using radiocarbon dating to create a timeline of this ancient city. Jerusalem hasn't had much peace in its history as a city. In 586 BC, it was destroyed by the Babylonians. In 70 AD, it was destroyed by the Romans. Now, a new archaeological investigation on Mount Zion has revealed evidence of both violent episodes in the city's life. Geographically speaking, Mount Zion is the name of the hill upon which the original city of David was built. The mountain is ancient, covered in streets, old walls, honking cars, churches, and hundreds upon hundreds of pilgrims. It's also heaven for archaeologists, or a nightmare, depending on how you look at it. With layers and layers of history piled one on top of the other, it's a challenge to excavate, that's for sure. Near the top of the hill, archaeologists found evidence of Jerusalem's destruction in 70 AD by the Romans. A few feet underneath, evidence of the attack in 586 BC was uncovered. But these were only 2 episodes. What you might not know is that Jerusalem has been attacked 52 times, captured 44 times, and besieged 23 times. This is according to Professor Eric Klein, who wrote the book on Jerusalem's history of being attacked and taken over by everyone from Alexander the Great to the Crusaders to the Arabs to the Egyptians. The list goes on. The city of Jerusalem has belonged to many countries and empires over the years. What's amazing about Mount Zion is that it's the only place where physical evidence of the Babylonian and Roman attacks has been discovered. For example, archaeologists found bronze and iron arrowheads used by the Babylonians almost 2,600 years ago. Evidence of the Roman attack 2,000 years ago comes in the form of calcified stones. Researchers found bricks that were superheated as the Romans scorched house after house, putting the whole city to the torch. The book that proves Exodus was real. You've heard the Bible's version of the Exodus. The Pharaoh was evil, he refused to let the Israelites go, God summoned 10 plagues, and Moses parted the Red Sea. That might just be the shortest summary in human history, but what do you know about the Egyptian record of the Exodus? That's what I want to get to. One of the most common arguments against the story of Exodus is that there are no ancient Egyptian records of it happening, and they recorded pretty much everything. Outside the Bible, there are no surviving texts describing the Pharaoh and the plagues. But if you look at the big picture, only a tiny fragment of Egyptian papyri has survived the last 3,000 years. Time is not kind to papyrus. And then imagine all of the texts and documents that were lost when the ancient libraries were burned, sacked, and destroyed. Temples have barely survived the last 3 millennia, never mind thin scrolls. There are plenty of hieroglyphs and etched tablets, but papyrus is rare. Egyptologist Kenneth Kitchen once wrote that the entirety of Egypt's administrative records is lost. But not everything is lost. One early Egyptian historian's writings miraculously survived. Manetho's 3-volume work, Egyptiaca, is a chronological history of Egypt. He pulls a lot of his information from older sources, but so does the Bible. The original text hasn't survived, but some of its texts were copied by later historians like Josephus in the 1st century, and one of the copied stories sounds a little like the events of Exodus. In this ancient Egyptian text, Manetho describes an Egyptian king by the name Amenophes. One piece of the text says, he might see the gods if he would clear the whole country of the lepers and of the other impure people. The passage goes on to say that there were about 80,000 of these lepers and the other impure ones. They worked in the quarries east of the Nile, separated from the rest of the Egyptians. This is already starting to sound like the Israelites who were shunned by the Egyptians and forced to work as slaves. But the coincidences are even more intense than that. The pharaoh was afraid that the gods would be angry at him because of the way he was treating these people. He was also afraid of a certain prophet and his priests who were gaining a lot of traction with common folk. This could easily be interpreted as Moses' influence spreading amongst the slave population. This Moses figure, named Osarsif in the Egyptiaca, attempted to incite a religious revolution. There was a brutal struggle led by the shepherd and his flock against the pharaoh and his army. In the end, Osarsif and his lepers were kicked out of Egypt. Even the historian Josephus understood this was a story about the Jewish exodus from Egypt. It's not an exact retelling of Exodus, but the value of Manetho's account is inarguably important. Perhaps Moses didn't part the Red Sea with magic, but it appears that a large group of enslaved people may have rebelled against a pharaoh. The Pilate Papyrus, proof of Jesus. The Pilate Papyrus is one of the smallest yet most impactful pieces of evidence that Jesus Christ existed. Yet there are certain things experts just can't agree on. The papyrus is a fragment from a much larger codex, measuring about the size of a credit card. It's currently kept at the John Rylands University Library in Manchester, where it's on permanent display. The papyrus is important because it could be the oldest surviving fragment from a New Testament Bible. The problem is, nobody can agree on when it was written. Some scholars believe it was written as early as 100 AD, making it only a couple decades older than the original version written by John himself. The papyrus contains fragments from 14 verses of the Gospel of John, 7 on the back and 7 on the front. The scene being depicted is that of Jesus before Governor Pontius Pilate. Out of all the scenes that could have been discovered, it had to be the one where Pilate is discussing Jesus' imminent death. How spooky is that? The fragment was discovered along with a group of other fragments from an Egyptian marketplace in 1920. Even if the papyrus is not direct proof that Jesus existed and that Pontius Pilate helped execute him, it's okay. I have one more piece of proof that I think you're going to be very interested in. An excavation led by the Hebrew University of Jerusalem between 1968 and 1969 turned up a mysterious copper alloy piece of jewelry. It turned out to be a very, very old ring. But nobody knew quite how important it was until recently. After decades, someone decided to clean and photograph the ring. They were shocked to find the Greek inscription Elato on it. This ring bore the name of Pontius Pilate. Was this worn on the finger of the Roman governor when he condemned Jesus to death? It's very possible. The ring was discovered in Herodium, deep in the Judean desert. It was found in the region where Pilate was governor, and it has his name on it. You don't get better proof than this. The ring could have even been there at the crucifixion. The Jesus Boat. The Jesus Boat may sound like a ride at the Holy Land experience in Orlando, but it's actually a real artifact from the days of Jesus Christ. The broken ancient boat was found on the shore of the Sea of Galilee in Israel almost 40 years ago in 1986. There's a lot of debate over whether Jesus Christ truly sat in this boat or not. I'll start with the discovery. Brothers Moshe and Yuval Lufan were fishermen and amateur archaeologists. Their dream had always been to find an ancient shipwreck in the Sea of Galilee, where their family had fished for generations. In the 1980s, when drought caused the water level in the lake to plummet, their dream came true. They came across a boat buried on the shore. They reported their discovery, and the Israel Antiquities Authority took over. Rumors spread that the boat was packed with gold, so a group of armed guards had to stand watch day and night to keep away treasure hunters. It was quite the operation because the boat hadn't been exposed to the atmosphere in centuries. Archaeologists had to wrap the boat in fiberglass and insulating foam to remove it. Here's some of the foam they used, still on display at the Yigal Allon Museum. The boat was in use between 50 BC and 50 AD, precisely when Jesus Christ was alive. Had he walked along the Sea of Galilee, he would have seen this boat. He may have even used the boat himself. Detailed analysis has shown that the boat went through several repairs and was continuously in use for up to a century. It was only left to sink when it got so damaged that repairs were pointless. This was the exact type of boat that would have been used by Jesus and his disciples. many of whom were fishermen. The importance of the Jesus boat is not to be understated. It's an important artifact for Jews because it shows the type of boat their ancestors used. And it's important to Christians because this type of boat played a huge role in Jesus' life and his ministry. Here's a stat to blow your mind. This type of fishing boat is mentioned 50 times in the Gospels. There aren't too many other things mentioned quite so many times in the New Testament. Do you think Jesus could have sat in this boat while catching fish? Or at least one of his disciples? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Ancient medical anomalies and giants. There is a real possibility that giants once walked among us. Not just giants, but biblical giants with 6 fingers and 6 toes. Evidence can be found across the globe. Professor Tom Meyer of the Shasta Bible College claims that archaeological evidence demonstrates that ancient cultures had knowledge of 9-foot-tall humans. Meyer explained how he met NBA player George Murison, who stands 7'7". Meeting someone who stands so close to heaven makes giants seem like a real possibility. And don't even get me started on Robert Wadlow, the man who stood 8 feet 11.1 inches in 1940. Robert was living proof that people can grow nearly 9 feet tall. He did suffer from some serious medical issues and his life was very difficult, but he was still a living giant. Tom Meyer said that the Israelites believed wholeheartedly in giants. They also believed that giants suffered from a condition known as polydactylism. This condition is considered to be one of the most common congenital hand abnormalities in the world right now. Babies are born all the time with 1 or more extra fingers. Evidence of polydactylism in ancient history can be found all over the place. In the ruins of the city of Jericho, archaeologists discovered a crumbling statue of a person with 6 toes. In ancient Egypt, at the outpost of Deir el-Balah, archaeologists discovered a sarcophagus depicting a person with 6 fingers on each hand. And another example was found within the library of Ashurbanipal, the Assyrian king whose name appears in the Bible. These statues tell archaeologists that ancient civilizations were familiar with polydactylism, but the Bible takes it to a giant level, pun totally intended. The Bible says that Goliath's 3rd son had 6 fingers on each hand and 6 toes on each foot. Goliath and all 3 of his sons were 9 feet tall. This is where things are going to get a little wild, so you might want to strap yourself in. You've heard of the Nephilim before, but what do you know about the Rephaim? The Nephilim, according to the Old Testament, were the first giants. God sent a group of angels to watch over humanity, but those angels turned out to be bad. They seduced human women, and those women gave birth to abominations. The Nephilim were so hideous and horrible that God sent a flood to destroy human civilization, taking out the Nephilim at the same time. But what if God didn't get every last Nephilim, like a bug exterminator missing a few pesky cockroaches? This is where the Rephaim come in, a secondary group of giants that appear in the Old Testament. Their name literally translates to terrible ones. With a name like that, they were surely up to no good. The Bible describes the Rephaim as a mighty people of very tall stature who lived in Canaan. The first appearance of these mysterious giants is Genesis 14:5. The book of Genesis says that when the Israelites approached the Promised Land, after their exodus from Egypt and after wandering the desert, they were afraid. They were afraid because the land was filled with giants. 4 groups of giants to be exact. They were the Rephaim, Zuzim, Emim, and Anakim. In Deuteronomy, Og is named as the last of the Rephaim in his land. He was the king of Bashan, sleeping in a bed 13 feet long and 6 feet wide. Og was defeated, as were the rest of the tribes of giants, by the king of Elam and his human allies. This was the end of giants upon the planet, according to the Bible. But were they real? We already know it is possible for people to grow almost 9 feet tall. We also know that in the ancient world, people with 6 toes and 6 fingers were common. Perhaps the Rephaim were the descendants of the last few Nephilim who didn't die in the flood. And maybe they really were defeated by an alliance of humans 3,000 years ago. King Artaxerxes, Nehemiah, and the Mysterious Wall. In the 1920s, archaeologists discovered the Northern Tower in the city of David, a poorly constructed fortification from ancient times. Nobody paid much attention to it until 2007, when researcher Dr. Ayelet Mazar took an unusual interest in the structure. What the doctor found would be beyond anyone's expectations. The tower was in very poor shape, neglected for over a century and crumbling into pieces. The IAA approved Dr. Mazar's plan to excavate and repair the tower. The plan was easy. Dr. Mazar and her team would dismantle it brick by brick and then rebuild it using modern mortar. But that wasn't quite what happened. The tower was dismantled, but then they got to the foundation, which was in pretty rough shape. They would need to remove the foundation entirely so that the tower could be properly supported. This meant they were going to excavate underneath the tower, so that they wouldn't get a Leaning Tower of Pisa situation. During the excavation, it became clear that the tower was only one piece of a much larger fortification. Dr. Mazar and her colleagues found evidence that the tower was connected to a long section of wall. They also discovered a few dog burials and some shards of pottery, all dating back to the Persian era between the 6th and 5th century BC. This was shocking because before, nobody thought the tower was more than a little over 2,000 years old. But Dr. Mazar concluded that the tower had been built around 450 BC. Suddenly, this crumbling tower fit perfectly with an old biblical tale. In the Bible, Nehemiah was a Jewish man who was taken captive by the Persians during the reign of King Artaxerxes in 444 BC. At some point, the king allowed Nehemiah to return to Judah, where he was to rebuild the crumbling walls and gates of Jerusalem. More than a century earlier, in the 6th century BC, the Babylonian invasion of Jerusalem had destroyed the walls. The Mystery Tower in the city of David was likely part of the wall Nehemiah built. With the new dating, it matches perfectly to the biblical story. Historians already know that Artaxerxes and the Babylonian invasion was real, and now it looks like the entire book of Nehemiah could be real as well. The Bible claims it only took him 52 days to build the wall. The poor quality of the construction of the tower confirms the whole thing was likely a rushed job. Happy God of the Nile. When it comes to amazing artifacts pulled from the depths of the Mediterranean, the lost city of Tanis Heraklion takes the cake. This ancient city, once a bustling port that thrived even before Alexandria was founded in 331 BC, was once a place of glory. Even if you already know about the city, you might not know what I'm about to tell you. Every ship coming from Greece stopped in Tanis Heraklion because it was the port of entry to Egypt. As a port city, Tanis Heraklion grew filthy rich. With wealth came religious importance, as the city had enough money to build the monumental Temple of Amun. 2,500 years ago, Tanis Heraklion was the Egyptian equivalent of Vatican City. Then it was lost, swallowed by the sea, and annihilated. It lasted from the 8th century BC to the 8th century AD, a respectable 1,000 years. Nobody saw it again until the year 2000, when French archaeologist Frank Gaudiot uncovered it. And just in time, too. The city's name had just about been scrubbed from the collective memory of humanity. Very little about the city remains in any ancient writing, but there is one example that can shed some light on just how important the city was. In the 5th century BC, Greek historian Herodotus wrote of a grand temple built in Egypt to rival all the temples of the world. He also wrote that Helen of Troy visited Tanis Heraklion with her secret lover Paris before the two of them helped start the Trojan War. Some have suggested that Cleopatra herself could be buried somewhere within the ruins. The main issues archaeologists face right now is that the city is enormous, and it's completely submerged. It's a couple miles from the coastline, between 30 and 40 feet deep in Abu Qir Bay. It's also vast, covering a huge area, and its buildings are so effectively destroyed that digging through them is costly. Even with so many challenges, archaeologists take it in stride. They pull one artifact at a time up from the murky depths. In the last 24 years, coins, ritual objects, and colossal statues have been pulled from the city. Over 700 ancient anchors have been identified, along with the haunting wreckage of 79 ships. But there is so much more, all of it just waiting to be brought to the surface. One of my favorite discoveries is the giant head of Hapi, the god Hapi. At least archaeologists think it's Hapi's head. Here's a photo of the massive structure being brought to the surface, taken by Christoph Garrick. The statue is made of red granite, originally standing almost 20 feet tall. If you like big heads, here's another snapshot of a colossal noggin. This one belongs to an unknown pharaoh. The image also taken by Crystal Meteorite. The reason I like the head of Hapi so much is that Hapi was a fascinating Egyptian deity. He was the god of the Nile's annual flood. He wasn't technically the god of the Nile, only of its flood. The Egyptians were very specific about their gods. He was sometimes called Lord of the River Bringing Vegetation. This might seem strange, but it does make sense. Each year, when the Nile flooded, the flood deposited rich soil all along the banks. This allowed the Egyptians to grow a multitude of crops, thereby feeding their people. The god Hapi was directly responsible for whether or not Egyptians had dinner on their plates. Of course they worshipped him. A drowned world exposed. On June 6, 2023, Ukraine's Kakhovka Dam was destroyed as part of the Russian-Ukraine conflict. It was a major disaster. The dam unleashed torrents of rampaging water, draining the reservoir and causing unprecedented flooding. It was a humanitarian tragedy. It was also a boon for seekers of treasure. Take a look at these satellite images from Planet Labs PBC. The upper image is from June 5th, showing the reservoir as it was. The bottom image is from June 13th, showing the reservoir practically empty. This is what happens when a dam bursts. The water dropped more than 16 feet. Soon, people began illegally collecting artifacts for sale. These fortune seekers are known in the archaeology community as black archaeologists. Whatever they find typically ends up on the black market. I don't think that's quite politically correct, but that's the term for right now. One of the first discoveries reported was a skull with a Nazi helmet, but that was only the start. The Kakhovka Dam was built by the Soviet Union to prevent uncontrolled flooding and improve transportation. In 1956, construction was complete and a humongous area was flooded. The flood wiped away villages, churches, and a place known as the Cossack Atlantis. The lands had been home to the ancient steppe warriors, the Zaporizhian Cossacks. Nobody knows when the original Cossack community started to form in Ukraine. It was likely around the 12th century AD. Then, by the 15th century, they had become a force to be reckoned with. The Cossacks were a major political entity at the very heart of Ukraine's post-medieval history. They were also a powerful military force that were not to be messed with. The Tsardom of Russia didn't mess with them, and neither did the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealths or the Crimean Khanate. I know you may not have heard of all of these groups before. The basic thing to know is that the Zaporizhian Cossacks dominated Ukraine, right up until a series of conflicts and poor alliances resulted in them being disbanded by the Russian Empire in the 18th century. Then, with the building of the Kakhovka Dam, a huge portion of their history was flooded. The Ukrainian government has already started figuring out how to rebuild the dam. In the meantime, people will keep finding goodies. Somebody has already discovered a wooden boat from 500 years ago. Who knows what will be next? And now for number 12, but first, it's shout-out time! I want to give a huge thank you to Buffalo Hawk for the generous super thanks. We wouldn't be here without you. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already to join the Origins Explained family. Munitions from World War II. You're not going to believe where a huge pile of munitions from World War II was just discovered. Get ready for a literal blast from the past. Bombs, submarine weapons, smoke devices, and plenty of bullets. These munitions were found off the coast of Los Angeles. I bet you didn't know the ocean floor outside the City of Angels is riddled with explosives. The discovery was just made by the Scripps Institution of Oceanography at the University of California. Their scientists did a survey of the coastline along LA using sonar, video cameras, and deep water vehicles. They were shocked to find multiple dump sites with unexploded bombs and munitions. They weren't even looking for munitions. Eric Terrell from the investigative team said they were looking for the remains of barrels that were used to dump chemical waste decades ago, as recently as the 1970s. Not many people know that the seafloor just south of Los Angeles was used as an industrial waste dump site starting in the 1930s. There are tens of thousands of barrels scattered across the bottom of the ocean, most of them filled with chemical waste. I can even tell you one specific chemical, DDT. The pesticide so dangerous it's banned. And while I hate to be a downer, you have to hear about the sea lion. Scientists have confirmed adult sea lions around California have a high rate of cancer. Scientists also connected the cancer to DDT, the pesticide banned in 1972. It was banned because of the damage it was doing to the ecosystems. It killed everything. So, ironically, American companies dumped it into the ocean. And now the seals have cancer. As for those munitions just discovered, they litter the ocean floor between Catalina Island and Long Beach. The research team used sonar to map 135 square miles, finding boxes of munitions, Mark 9 depth charges, and Mark 1 smoke floats. Now it's the Navy's job to determine what they're going to do about the problem. They might pull the munitions up, disposing of them in a more environmentally friendly way, or they might leave them where they are, 3,000 feet deep. Before moving on, I'll leave you with this image. It's a crab scuttling on the seafloor off the coast of California, right next to a package of munitions. The picture was taken by the Scripps Institution of Oceanography's remotely operated vehicle in 2023, so just last year. The warrior with a mustache. When archaeologists raised part of a 17th century shipwreck from the English Channel, they were greeted with a bizarre face. On the rudder section of the old Dutch trading ship, somebody had carved the huge head of a warrior with a mighty mustache. He's quite the character. Let me back it up a bit and give you the full story. 400 years ago, a mysterious Dutch trading ship sank off the coast of Dorset. It was accidentally discovered in the early 2000s by a dredger. 6 years of underwater investigations followed. In the end, the experts agreed it was time to raise as much as they could from Davy Jones's locker. This was no easy task. The merchant vessel was 130 feet long, laying at the bottom of the sea, but they didn't need all of it. In fact, there was no way they were getting the whole thing. The marine archaeologists mostly wanted to recover some of the beautiful carvings that covered the boat. The ship was decked out. It had an enormous mural-like carving along its stern, depicting characters from myth like mermen, their eye sockets bedazzled with precious stones. Archaeologists suspect this was one of the most lavishly decorated boats that ever sailed the seven seas. Almost every inch of it had been expertly carved. The stern was too big and heavy to recover. The archaeological team from English Heritage managed to earn themselves a grant of just over $500,000. It was enough money to salvage the wooden rudder with the mustached warrior on it. The rudder had become separated from the main hull, making it easier to pick up off the bottom of the ocean. Nobody knows who the mustached warrior was. Nobody even knows what happened to the ship. The experts call it the Swash Channel wreck because they can't figure out its name. Tests of the wood show it was built around 1628. The wood came from a forest along the Dutch-German border, and that's pretty much all the info they have. The mustached warrior is currently on display at the Poole Museum in Dorset. Gods and coins from ancient Rome. Archaeologists have called it the biggest discovery in 30 years, and it was all thanks to a pair of recreational divers in Israel. Ran Feinstein and Ofer Ranan were diving inside the ancient Roman port of Caesarea when they found the bones of an ancient merchant ship. I don't know what you find when you go diving, but I hope it's as exciting as these guys. Ran and Ofer found an actual ship that hadn't been seen by human eyes in 1,600 years. They reported their discovery to the Israel Antiquities Authority, who sent their own professional divers to the site. And this was where things got interesting. A large portion of the seabed had been cleared by the ocean currents, like a big invisible broom sweeping away the debris. This left the remnants of the merchant ship sitting at the top of the sand. Divers with the IAA have already brought a ton of artifacts to the surface. These artifacts are awesome. How much money would you pay for an authentic statue of the moon goddess Luna? Or what about a bronze lamp depicting the Roman sun god Sol? At least a few bucks, right? Archaeologists also pulled up statues of animal figures, like a wild boar with a swan perched on its head, and they found 2 huge clumps of metal, each one weighing 45 pounds. The metallic clumps turned out to be money. Each huge clump is made of thousands of coins that fused together from centuries in the water. Jacob Sharvett with the Marine Archaeology Unit said a marine assemblage of treasure like this hasn't been found in Israel in 3 decades. Because the statues were buried in sand, they were protected. They look as if they were cast just yesterday. But where did all of this stuff come from? The treasure was on a merchant ship delivering goods from one port to another when it wrecked, perhaps taking the whole crew with it. There are thousands of these types of shipwrecks spread across the seas of Rome's old territory. The coins have the face of Emperor Constantine on them, so it was easy to date them to his rule between 312 and 337 AD. Constantine was one of the most important emperors in Roman history. He was the one who turned the empire into an official Christian state, jump-starting the spread of Christianity. The God of Luck. I'd like to introduce you to a god that I'm almost positive you've never heard of before. He's not Roman, he's not Greek, he's not even in the Bible. His name is Ebisu, the jolly Japanese god of fishermen and good luck. In 1988, a nearly life-size statue of Ebisu was erected above Kesennuma Bay. He quickly became an auspicious symbol in Japan, attracting tourists while locals believed he would bring luck to their fishermen. Ebisu stood vigilant over the bay until the devastating tsunami of 2011. The floodwater washed Ebisu away. The god of luck wasn't so lucky. Then again, maybe he is lucky, because once more he will be overlooking Kesennuma Bay. In November 2019, a diver conducting an underwater survey for a reconstruction project happened upon Ebisu stuck in his watery grave. Take a look at him in this picture, courtesy of Kesennuma City. This was where the statue ended up after the tsunami, trapped in murk and glue for 8 years. Ebisu was promptly salvaged by a crane and brought to the surface. He was surprisingly undamaged, other than his broken fishing rod. Local priest of the Isuzu Shrine, Masashi Kamiyama, said the recovery of the statue gives hope to the people devastated by the 2011 tsunami. Ebisu is due to be cleaned up a bit and then installed near his original position, where he will once more grant luck to fishermen and sailors. On your next visit to Kesennuma, be sure to drop by and say hi. Explosive reminders of the Civil War. On February 17, 1865, the mayor of Columbia surrendered and the Confederate forces retreated. What happened after that is typically left out of the history books. The Union soldiers got wasted and started ransacking the city, so drunk they could barely see. By the end of the party, more than 2/3 of Columbia had burned to the ground. This was an episode of the American Civil War, a piece of history that recently came back into public view thanks to some treasures discovered at the bottom of South Carolina's Congaree River. During a project to clean up the river, workers found 10-inch cannonballs, artillery shells, and many other Civil War weapons that have been in the river since 1865. Most of the weapons came from the Confederate forces. After the city of Columbia was occupied under the leadership of General William Tecumseh Sherman, the Union soldiers threw thousands of Confederate weapons into the river and their supplies. They threw away sabers, bayonets, ball cartridges, and gunpowder. Archaeologists have always known this stuff was hiding in the river, but they didn't have the funds or the resources to recover them until now. The cleanup effort began in June 2022. The crew has to use armor-plated excavators just in case they accidentally trigger a Civil War bomb. A mysterious medieval helmet. A helmet was found at the bottom of the sea just off the coast of Sicily this year, 2024. I don't think you'll be able to fit it on your head though, because it suffered a bit of damage. The medieval piece of headgear is encrusted with bits of sea gunk. They wouldn't offer much protection these days. The helmet came as an interesting find because nothing else was found with it. Experts aren't sure if it was part of a shipwreck or if a soldier accidentally dropped their helmet off the side of a boat. It's a one-off artifact from the Italian Renaissance. Just a random helmet with a story that I would love to know. The only thing researchers from the Superintendency of the Sea said is that the helmet likely belonged to an infantryman during the late medieval period or the early Renaissance. Judging by the crest at its top, researchers believe the helmet is a capucet, likely belonging to a soldier from Spain or Portugal. Sadly, that's all the information I can give you. I know, it's a bummer. Divers are planning a return to the site where the helmet was found to do a more thorough investigation, so be sure to watch all of the next videos on watery discoveries for updates. If a shipwreck is found, you'll be hearing about it from me right away. Queen Anne's Revenge. How many artifacts do you think have been recovered from Blackbeard's ship? I'm going to throw a number at you, and it's going to be shocking. Since the first dive down to the spooky remains of the great pirate sunken vessel in 1997, over 400,000 artifacts have been raised. That's a lot of artifacts. Archaeologists have pulled up 24 cannons, anchors, a grapnel, tools, blast trade beads, parts of the ship itself, cannonballs, fragments of pottery, the list goes on. Here's a picture of Blackbeard's anchor by Robert Willett. If you're new to Blackbeard, this is going to be exciting. The ship I'm talking about is Queen Anne's Revenge, which ran aground near Beaufort in North Carolina 306 years ago in 1718. All these centuries later, Blackbeard is still the most famous pirate captain in history. Let's dig a little deeper into the history of his ship and of Blackbeard himself. I think you'll be surprised at what we find. Historians generally agree that Blackbeard was not quite as ferocious as the legends made him out to be. Blackbeard, real name Edward Teach, understood the power of his image. He dressed completely in black. When he boarded an enemy ship, he put lit fuses or slow matches in his hair and beard so that he was shrouded in a fog, looking like a demon within a hellish aura of sulfur. These kinds of tactics helped Blackbeard become notorious. Almost nothing is known about his early life. He showed up on the pirating scene in 1716, a crew member working under Captain Benjamin Hornigold. He rose through the ranks quickly, earning himself his own ship. Then when Hornigold retired from being a pirate in 1717, Edward was left with the reins to the pirate kingdom of the West Indies. That year, Blackbeard captured a French slave ship called La Concorde. He renamed the ship Queen Anne's Revenge, loaded her with 40 guns, and went about his vicious pirate business. He formed a sort of pirate conglomerate, including other famous renegades like Stede Bonnet. Together, they blockaded the Charleston port and ransomed everybody in the town. This sounds like it occurred over a long period, but it all happened in 1717. He ran his ship aground on a sandbar and fled to Bath, North Carolina, where he accepted a royal pardon. Blackbeard could have stopped being a pirate right there and then. He could have lived a long, wealthy life. But he went back to the sea, where he was captured in November of 1718 and killed. If you want to learn more about Blackbeard, I highly suggest visiting the North Carolina Maritime Museum in Beaufort, where you can physically see the artifacts from Queen Anne's Revenge. Trawling for Bombs. The crew of the Ticino trawling vessel shared a moment of unbridled terror when they accidentally pulled in an unexploded bomb from World War II. In the trawler's net was a humongous explosive weighing an astonishing 1,000 pounds. It was 3 feet long, likely jettisoned by a bomber with the Royal Air Force in the 1940s. Luckily, nobody was hurt. The crew immediately alerted the Coast Guard that they had a bomb. The British Navy bomb disposal unit was sent from the Clyde Naval Base, and the experts confirmed the explosive to be of British origin. They also quickly got rid of it. They dropped the bomb into deep waters about a mile from shore and then detonated it when the coast was clear. Let's just hope the explosion didn't take out any unwitting sea creatures. The whole ordeal was something of a nightmare for the trawler's crew. When they first hauled in the net, they thought it was filled with 1,000 pounds of fish, not 1,000 pounds of exploding dew. New species in Utah. Scientists have found a tiny worm living underwater. This small, slippery, and a little yucky discovery could change the current understanding of Utah's most famous lake. The Great Salt Lake is a big, salty lake in Utah, a body of water 950 square miles. Scientists from the University of Utah wanted to learn what kinds of creatures can live in such a salty environment. They already knew about the lake's brine shrimp and flies, but they wanted to find more. The first step was to sift through sediment deposits. Sure enough, they hit the jackpot. Scientists found tiny worms known as nematodes. It came as a bit of a shock because it was believed the nematodes of Utah's Great Salt Lake had gone extinct in 1985. That was the year the lake bed shrank significantly, exposing the worms to air and wiping them out. Or so everyone thought. Scientists have now found thousands of microscopic worms living inside the rocks and sediment of the lake, even as it shrinks to record-low levels. This is impressive because the lake is about 9 times saltier than the ocean. It's basically a giant bowl of salt, so anything that manages to live inside of it is miraculous. This discovery is important because it challenges our current perception of where life can live. Researchers think that in time, studying the ecosystem of the Great Salt Lake could shed light on how alien organisms might survive on planets like Mars. Guns and coins from the Franklin expedition. I can't think of a more terrifying expedition than the Franklin expedition. But if you can, when you're done hearing what I have to say, be sure to let me know in the comments. The Franklin expedition began in 1845. A group of sailors led by courageous Captain Sir John Franklin went in search of the Northwest Passage. The crews were spread across two ships, the HMS Erebus and the HMS Terror. Not a single one of the 129 men who ventured into the frigid waters of Canada survived. It was one of the most hopeless expeditions in human history. There's something inherently frightening about what happened to the ships. Maybe that's why so many books have been written about their fate. 2 centuries after the ship sank in 2014, Canadian divers found the wreckage. Since then, Parks Canada and the Natural Heritage Society have been busy pulling artifacts out of the water. In September 2023, underwater archaeologists conducted 68 dives. They discovered a chest, pistols, military equipment, coins, and medicinal bottles. They also found random objects like a leather shoe, some science equipment, a thermometer, and even a fishing rod. All these awesome relics were brought to the surface and will hopefully be put on display, either in Canada or in Britain. Here's a snapshot of archaeologist Marc-André Bernier poking through the ancient chest inside the Erebus. The image is thanks to Brett Seymour of Parks Canada. I want to really dig into the spookiness of what happened to these 2 ships. But it's tricky because nobody knows precisely what happened. Most of the information available comes from Inuit oral histories. That's another part of what makes the disaster so intriguing. Only Canadian folklore speaks of what happened. The 2 ships got stuck in the ice off the coast of Beechey Island in 1845. They managed to break free in 1846. They continued their journey but got stuck in ice again on the tip of King William Island, also Nunavut. What followed were 2 years of misery. It was hard enough to stay home for 2 years during COVID. How would you feel about staying on a frozen boat in the middle of the Arctic for 2 years? No electricity, no TikTok, and nothing but smelly sailors to keep you company. They finally abandoned ship on April 22, 1848, then tried to walk to safety. None of them made it. It's believed they resorted to cannibalism. But since nobody survived to tell the tale, the particulars of their hardship remain a mystery. Only the Inuit people who came across their remains had any idea what those men had faced. The missing Ming treasure. There is a treasure hunt unfolding in China right now that is so epic they should make a Netflix documentary about it. It's a treasure hunt that could lead to the discovery of an astonishing amount of wealth. The hunt is taking place at the confluence of the Min River and the Jin River, where an ambush saw a peasant warlord be brought to ruin. Legend has it that in the 17th century, Zhang Xianzhong rose to power from a lowly peasant to a bloodthirsty baron. After pillaging small fiefdoms across the region, he was traveling upriver with his entire treasury when he was ambushed. Supreme commander of the Ming Dynasty's army, Yang Zhan, attacked the peasant warlord and claimed total victory. The warlord's whole fleet was sent to the bottom of where the 2 rivers meet, along with thousands of his soldiers. This went down right next to the town of Jiangku. I should mention that these rivers are deep and fast. Within minutes, the wreckage of the warlord's ships had already started floating away with the currents. But that hasn't stopped people like peasants and archaeologists and anyone with a net from searching the river for the lost treasure. Now, it's been found. Archaeologists with the Sichuan Provincial Institute of Archaeology and Cultural Relics dammed part of the Min River, allowing them unprecedented access to 250 acres of relatively dry riverbed. They were able to pick up treasures like you might pick up sand dollars on the beach. They've already uncovered more than 70,000 artifacts. The team has collected pieces of silver, gold, symbols of office, and scraps of military equipment. All the treasure points to Zhang's failed effort to start a new dynasty. He had needed all of that treasure he stole to buy his legitimacy as a ruler, but the ambush sent Zhang's treasure and his hopes to a watery grave. The Danish Beast of the Deep.
King Hans of Denmark ruled his nation from 1481 to 1513. During his reign, it's believed he had a powerful flagship built to lead his fleet. It was called the Gribsjunden. Amazingly, a piece of the flagship was recently pulled out of the water in Sweden. It's believed that Gribsjunden was carrying King Hans to Sweden for a diplomatic mission in 1495. But just before Hans made it ashore, the ship caught fire. Hans watched his favorite warship burn from a nearby escape boat. It was such a disaster, leaving the king in such a foul mood that he called off the mission. He didn't show up, and the Swedes were furious. Soon after, war broke out between the two countries. Historians often wonder how different things might have been if the Gribsjunden hadn't caught fire. If the diplomatic mission had been a success, maybe the war between Sweden and Denmark would have never happened. But it did, and nothing can change that. Now, all these years later, Swedish divers have started salvaging the remnants of the warship. It was originally found in the 1970s. The salvaging eddy part of it was a pipe dream. Now, with a bit more funding and better technology, divers have saved a wooden figurehead depicting a dog-like monster. It's most likely a beast from mythology, but nobody can identify it. The figurehead is one of the oldest preserved wood carvings of its kind. It's also rare. Marcus Sandkeger from the local museum said the figurehead is likely the only one left from a 15th century ship on the planet. Even after 520 years submerged, it's in excellent shape.
Thanks for watching. What's the craziest thing you've ever discovered underwater? Let me know in the comments below, and be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. See you soon. Bye!